Before we wrap up our Gacha drama story, let's finally talk about what life is like in modern South Korea.
Thank you.
In
Oh my God.
But
no, he's back to the no, dude. This guy, bro. Stop. He said, let's talk about modern Korea and went back to neo-Confucianism. Yeah, let's do that.
Is in the midst of a very bitter civil war, one that you might not even realize exists. And no, I'm not talking about the conflict with North Korea. Real-life lore's office is down the hall, to the right. The civil war I am referring to is the South Korean gender war, a conflict between Korean men, whom the women in this conflict might call male chauvinists or misogynists, and Korean women, whom the men in this conflict might call... Now, Mooney, I can hear you say, we have gender war in my country too, why the feminists and the chauvinists are constantly going at it on the internet. South Korea is different. The gender war there has escalated to the point of physical violence, terroristic behavior, and even...
Is this real or is it anti-Korean propaganda? No, I think this is fucking real, dude. At least, like, listen, all I'm going to say is this. You wouldn't have a movement like the 4B movement, which is like a bunch of women saying like, we're not even interacting with men at all, if this was not a very glaringly obvious, very real, and like uniquely bad problem. Because like a lot of Americans after the Donald Trump election victory went on TikTok and were like, oh, let's do our own version of the 4B movement. And I don't think it'll stick. Partially because a shit ton of women in America are also obviously very misogynistic. There is a racial dynamic at play here as well. You know, 55% of white women still voted for Donald Trump. That's something that you got to remember. And outside of that, I just think that it's like, it's bad, but either people are oblivious to how bad it is, like women and men are oblivious to how bad it is, or it's nowhere near as bad as it is in South Korea, from what I understand. Like these guys, like think of the worst type of person that you know that just like hates women and wants to do like and shit. And maybe you don't know a person like that, but like think about the worst person that you see online, right? The type of person that like hails what's his face as like a hero, the gentleman or whatever the his name was. God damn it. Was his Supreme Gentleman? Everyone's saying Tectone. No, I'm talking about Elliot Rodger. Okay. Yeah, Elliot Rodger. Like people that think he's a hero for killing a bunch of people at UCSB. I feel like in Korea there's like it's more permissible to be that outwardly incel.
Even political upheaval. And the tension in Korea.
Don't just say white women, why are you doing that? No, I'm saying that like there is a shit ton of amongst women in America, like the majority of white women voted for Donald Trump. Also, white women make up the majority of women. So, you know.
Between chauvinists and feminists is so substantial that even the tiniest bump can cause an eruption. This is the story of one such an eruption. A new front in the war between men and women in Korea started over something almost unbelievably trivial. That thing being gacha game art. In case you don't know, gacha games are generally mobile games that...
Oh my God, right after the... oh, I'm gonna die. This coming right after we watched the Sean video about fucking Grums and how like American gamers and Western gamers like constantly talk about booba in video games. Oh my fucking Lord, dude. Oh God. Oh, G, save us. Even though you make so much gacha. Oh my God, I just realized G is not going to save us. He's making gacha as a weapon. He's making gacha games as a weapon. Oh my God, dear leader G, you have unleashed such a devastating tool upon every capitalist nation on this planet. Oh my God. Fuck.
That implement a randomized vending machine mechanic, or gacha mechanic, so named for the sound a Japanese toy capsule vending machine makes when you turn its crank. In gacha games, you pay in-game currency which can sometimes cost real money and you receive, well, something. That something very often being a character or character skin that you can then use in-game. The very notion that mobile gacha games could lead to political upheaval is absurd. How does a society as sophisticated and wonderful as Korea's arrive at a point where animated waifus can result in terrorism? This conflict has deep, winding roots in Korea, and we're going to try to approach this topic with a nuanced perspective. To do so, we'll explore both current events and historical context, both his story and hers story, in order to understand why little C's can cause such big trouble.
Stop sending me the BBC semen extraction video, please. I'm not gonna watch it, okay? Please.
But first, a quick word from our returning sponsor, Brilliant. Moon Channel viewers have enthusiastically told me about how Brilliant has worked for them.
Remember,
And
this,
so I'm happy
this
to have
channel
Brilliant
is a new
sponsoring
channel that I'm
another
reacting
video.
to. It's called Moon Channel. It is not to be mistaken with the reactionary channel Moon, okay? I made that mistake. You shouldn't. And we're doing ethical react, so I'm gonna let this ad run.
Brilliant has thousands of interactive lessons ranging from basic to advanced topics.
Also, you can still
You can learn
subscribe.
math,
You can't
computer
avoid this
science, or data
ad,
analysis
but you can
with
avoid
only
all the
15
ads
minutes of interactive problem solving a day.
if
All
you
presented
subscribe,
in
even though I'm not running
bite-sized,
ads. But you can
low-pressure
show your
lessons that
support
are
by
as fun
subscribing
as they
for
are
$6 or for free with a Twitch
Try
Prime. Twitch
Brilliant
Primes are
for
still
a full
free.
30 days
You can
by
send me
clicking on
links
the
of
link
videos that I
provided in the
probably will
description
not
of the
watch,
video,
or maybe
by
might
visiting
if it's actually interesting.
brilliant.org/moonchannel.
By
If you are one of the
subscribing.
first 200
You can also
people to
get
sign
gifted
up,
a
you'll
sub.
even get 20% off an annual subscription. That's brilliant.org.
Oh, and Gila, thank you for the 5 gifted
Why settle
subs.
for smart when you could be brilliant? Our story begins in February of 2023 with a small but rapidly growing indie game studio called Project Moon. No relation. If you don't play mobile gacha games, you might know Project Moon from their games Library of Ruina, a card battler somewhat akin to Slay the Spire, and Lobotomy Corporation, a roguelite that plays like a combination between Fallout Shelter and Dwarf Fortress, with an SCP Foundation-like setting and a difficulty slider locked to masochistic. Project Moon's earlier games were standouts amongst their competitors for 2 reasons. The first reason was Project Moon's unique art style, which was simple but very sleek and stylized. The second reason was the lore. Project Moon's games are built around grim but fascinating stories which together create a Project Moon universe of sorts. And so, when Project Moon announced that it was producing a horror role-playing gacha game for mobile devices, there was a surprising amount of enthusiasm. Gacha games are notorious for being cash cows, but usually gacha games are published by big players in the industry like MiHoYo, Psy Games, or Nexon. Creating a gacha game that players will actually enjoy and spend money on is quite an endeavor. It's literally like creating an MMO, not just any team can do it. But Project Moon is not just any team, and they did indeed release their gacha game Limbus Company to very positive reception. Fans of Project Moon were, well, over the moon with Limbus Company, and they promoted it far and wide, with whispers of the game's surprising depth and unique art reaching even the dark, festering grottos of Western gacha Reddit. Limbus Company exploded in popularity, far exceeding the expectations of Project Moon. I would know, I fell for the hype myself and tried it back in early 2023. The game is a little bit like Darkest Dungeon mixed with Project Moon's former game in Library of Ruina, which I also happened to play. I determined back then that the game was neat, but too involved for me. I just didn't have the time to play. Evidently, not everyone shared in my sentiments. Limbus Company's player count grew and grew and grew. Prior to Limbus Company's release, Project Moon's highest ever player count for a game was in 2021 when Library of Ruina briefly saw a peak player count of roughly 7,000 players. By April of 2023, Limbus Company reported roughly 260,000 players and a revenue of $1.8 million within just 2 months of release, as per MMOByte.tv. MMOByte goes on to say that Limbus Company's launch was only a modest one, coming in at 15% of what Eversoul, another gacha game, launched to just 3 months prior. But Eversoul was published by Kakao Games, which is a subsidiary of Kakao, a South Korean internet giant that reported an annual revenue of $5.89 billion in 2022. Limbus Company taking home 15% of what Eversoul launched to is an extraordinary achievement for an entity as small as Project Moon. However, this smallness, this relative inexperience came at a cost for Project Moon. Their diehard fans, the ones that had promoted Limbus Company everywhere, knew the score. Their expectations were tempered with the knowledge that Project Moon is a small indie dev, and that problems with the game would be resolved slower than a larger, more experienced dev team might manage. The new players, though, well, they were much less understanding. Gacha devs are usually from big companies, and those dev teams can gauge the expectations of players more accurately and respond to complaints more quickly than a small, inexperienced indie team like Project Moon can. The new players, missing the context that the old players had, were upset.
I'm legitimately shocked at how this is going to turn into the gender war, but I guess we needed to understand like gacha games and you know,
that their expectations
and how they
were
play
unmet,
a formative
and
role
that
in
balance
this.
changes were slow. But there is another thing that these older players knew that these newer players didn't about Project Moon. Their expectations were tempered with the knowledge that Project Moon is a small indie dev, and that problems with the game would be resolved slower than a larger, more experienced dev team might manage. But there is another thing that these older players knew that these newer players didn't about Project Moon. Project Moon, you see, has an unstated anti-lewd stance. Their characters can be attractively designed, sure, but they make it a point to avoid egregious fan service, meaning sexualization. And so when Project Moon announced,
boo, no fan service, boo, woke, got him, dude. The player crashes and reloads that in a few frames, I think. Boo.
That Limbus Company would be adding 2 swimsuit characters for the summer season, the older players weren't expecting anything lewd. But the new players, the overwhelming majority of players, were expecting what every gacha offers for summer swimsuit characters. Fan service. Lots and lots of highly provocative, prurient fan service. One of the 2 summer characters was a male character named Summer Sinclair. He wore swim trunks, a collar, and not much else. Whereas the female character released was Summer Ishmael, and she wore a skin-tight diving wetsuit. Ishmael's usual outfit is a suit and tie, and so the wetsuit is quite fan-servicey. The skin-tight nature of a wetsuit, the focus on the character's body, it's all heavily sexualized, and this is for a company which has a history of avoiding such sexualization. But this wetsuit was not revealing enough for the new players, who were expecting the usual. What happened next shook the entire Korea gacha game industry to its very core, and the aftershock reverberated into wider Korean society. It started small, just some grumblings on various Korean forums by disgruntled players. But these grumblings, like a tiny snowball at the top of a snow-covered mountain, rolled along, collecting additional grievances as they went, each grievance compounding the severity of the last. The wetsuit being insufficiently
Bro, this is literally, oh my god. This is the exact same thing. Oh my god. This is Korean Gamergate. We just spent like 4 hours watching Western Gamergate, only to be hit in the face with, yet again, you guessed it, Korean Gamergate. Which I suspect is going to lead to some serious systemic consequences as well. Grums, if he actually had motion,
It wasn't just Project Moon keeping to some policy of anti-fan service, no. It was intentional. And it wasn't just intentional, it was malicious. And who was the malicious actor? Who was acting in bad faith to desexualize their gacha games? Well, it must have been a feminist. Someone purposefully designed swimsuit.
Rimba's company is a feminist game, so be careful, friends. This director allows depicting men in the form of slaves and refuses to communicate. If you don't want to pay money, avoid it. Oh my god. Okay, I'm calling for a mass purging of the gamers. We need to put them in the work camps immediately. Okay? I'm realizing that it turns out the real problem was gamers all along. It's making me it's making me go against my normal materialist analysis. It's making me focus maybe entirely too much on one specific group of people, on the virtue of their consumption. But honestly,
Ishmael and the Korean gacha gamers would find out who. The spark is lit, the powder keg fizzling. The event now infamously known as the Ishmael swimsuit incident has begun. On August 5th, Korean Air Flight 801 took off from Seoul en route to Guam. The aircraft, a Boeing 747-300, was in good working order. The pilot was Captain Park Young-chul, age 42. Captain Park was previously a pilot in the Korean Air Force and had accumulated a total of 8,932 hours of flight time, roughly 2/3 of which were as a civilian pilot. His first was Song Kyung-ho, age 40. He too was previously a pilot in the Korean Air Force, and with over 4,000 hours of flight time under his belt, roughly half of which were as a civilian pilot. First Officer Song was no greenhorn. The journey across the Pacific Ocean progressed without any apparent issue. As the flight approached Guam, however, it encountered a storm, which obscured the plane's final destination, Antonio B. Wonpat International Airport, from sight. In aviation lingo, these weather-related problems are called IMCs, instrument meteorological conditions, conditions in which one has to fly by flight instruments instead of utilizing sight. You may be familiar with the incident that follows. Perhaps you've already read a version of this story in Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. Anyone else's words to you, let's read the pilot's words together and do a play-by-play. This is the intra-cockpit communication transcript taken from Appendix B of the National Transportation Safety Board's Aircraft Accident Report. At 1521 UTC, the first officer notifies the captain that the condition at Guam is no good. The captain acknowledges this by stating that it rains a lot. As the descent continues, the first officer asks the captain, "Don't you think it rains more in this area here?" The captain doesn't respond to the questions. He makes further statements, and the first officer answers simply, "Yes." At 1526, just 5 minutes later, the flight engineer notices that something is wrong. He asks about Guam's condition. At 1527, the flight engineer then states that the weather radar has helped us a lot, to which the pilot responds, "Yes, they are very useful." At 1529, the captain states, "We should be getting onto the route," to which the flight engineer responds, "It is rising instead." The captain answers in the affirmative, "Yeah, you are right." 10 minutes later, the first officer discovers that their incoming runway's glide slope instrument landing system appears unresponsive. He appears to make a statement about it, which is then corroborated by the flight engineer, who asks aloud about 30 seconds later, "Is the glide slope working?" "Glide slope, yeah?" The captain replies, "Yes, yes, it's working." The flight engineer can only utter in response a baffled "ah." So, another voice interrupts, but it's unclear who it is. We can presume it was the captain. He asks,
This video has nothing to do with gender wars, Lamau? No, I think it's going to tie itself to, this is, remnants of sexism and misogyny and how quickly people can fucking whip up a hate campaign surrounding like not having their needs met, that not having their misogynistic needs met. This is a story about Korean culture and not speaking back to your, not speaking back as a subordinate. And then this will then, Korea is a hierarchical Confucian society. And then he's just giving you certain key aspects of Korean culture and how they arrived at this situation.
If the glide slope is working, to which the first officer replies, "Not usable." Finally, the captain acknowledges that since today's glide slope condition is not good, we need to maintain 1,440. Please set it. An unknown voice, presumably the first officer, replies with a simple yes. The flight engineer jokes that the guy working here probably was a GI in Korea before. Remember this line for later. The captain responds with a simple affirmation. The crew then goes through their landing checks, but about 1 minute later, the captain asks again, "Isn't glide slope working?" And then notes, "Wiper on." Nobody responds to his query this time. The flight engineer merely replies, "Yes, wiper is on." Not even a minute later, the first officer asks, "Not in sight?" The captain replies, "Oh, yes." The first officer then states, "Let's make a missed approach." The flight engineer confirms, "Not in sight." The first officer reciprocates the statement, "Not in sight, missed approach." The flight engineer says, "Go around." The captain says, "Go around." And then there's silence, save for the ground proximity warning system, calling out numbers. 50, 40, 30, 20. At 1:42 Guam local time, Korean Air 801 slams into the side of Nimitz Hill, just 3.5 miles away from the airport. Of the 254 people aboard, 229 perish. Let me ask you something about what we just read. Does that conversation seem fitting for an imminent plane crash? Why doesn't the first officer take more direct action? Why doesn't anyone tell air traffic control what is going on? How is it possible that the first officer and flight engineer can directly see what is happening and yet apparently fail to even utter a protest as the captain charges the plane directly into a hillside? The words in the transcript are translated into plain English, but there is an additional layer of context required to understand how this plane crash happened, and that is cultural context. Korean culture is extremely hierarchical, more so than China, more so than even Japan. When the first officer asks the captain, "Don't you think it rains more in this area here?" he is trying to respectfully communicate to his superior, an elder in age with more flight hours.
Bro, I'm not gonna die over manners. Yeah, that is pretty fucking wild. I stopped watching for 2 minutes. Is the video still about misogyny? It's just giving you, oh my god, chatters are so TikTok brain, bro. Let this fucking guy cook, dude. He's literally he's teaching you some aspects of fucking Korean culture first and foremost, okay? He's contextualizing how Korea became so fucking misogynistic.
That the area they're in has more rain and that they should try to avoid it. When the flight engineer chimes in later, stating that the weather radar has helped us a lot, this flight engineer is also trying to relay a suggestion to change course and avoid the weather conditions. When the first officer and flight engineer discover the glide slope isn't operational, the first officer mutters something about it, and the flight engineer asks the captain if the glide slope is working. This is a suggestion to the captain that the glide slope is, in fact, not working and that he should check it. But the captain responds that it is working, which is his statement to the flight engineer that the flight engineer needs to keep to his role and have some respect. The flight engineer replies with a baffled, so, knowing that the captain has realized his disrespect, has issued a condemnation, and has declined to check the glide slope instrument as a measured response to insubordination. The captain, satisfied with the behavior of the first officer and flight engineer, finally checks the glide slope instrument, noting that the condition isn't good, acknowledging the concerns brought up as an order. This communicates that the decision to work around the glide slope is his decision. The flight engineer then makes a joke. The guy working here probably was a GI in Korea before, a grunt. It's a joke punching down the ladder. The glide slope instruments are broken because someone lower in the hierarchy has done lower hierarchy things, typical of their status. The captain asks once again if the glide slope is working. Nobody answers, but the situation is growing more and more dire by the moment. Breaking with social protocol and understanding that there will be social consequences, the first officer makes the bold statement, "Let's make a missed approach," a direct suggestion and not a question. The flight engineer offers his support of the first officer by stating, "Not in sight." The first officer confirms, "Not in sight, missed approach." Just before the plane crashes, the flight engineer says, "Go around," and the captain, finally cracking, acknowledges that he will indeed go around. But it is too late. There is no panic, there are no further words spoken. The aircraft crashes into Nimitz Hill. If you speak, we'll say, fluent East Asian or belong to a cultural group that communicates indirectly like this, all of this talk may have already made sense to you the first time around. And for those of you who are disturbed by my translation and find it troublesome, consider this. The NTSB, in its executive summary of the incident, determined that the probable cause of the Korean Air Flight 801 accident was the captain's failure to adequately brief and execute the non-precision approach, and the first officer's and flight engineer's failure to effectively monitor and cross-check the captain's execution of approach. I told you that story in order to illustrate how Korean men treat each other. South Korea is an extremely hierarchical society. More so than in Japan, more so than in China. One's age, status, family, and gender determine one's role in society. Although Korea offers the appearance of a politically progressive, modernized country, underneath the veneer of glitz and glam, beneath the Innisfree toner, there exists a deeply conservative society. You might be familiar with the Japanese system of honorifics. In Japan, the more neutral honorific san is commonly used to address a hierarchical equal, or an individual whom you are not yet familiar with, akin to Mr. or Miss. You say their name followed by san, Muni-san. Sama is used when you're addressing someone of a higher status than you, akin vaguely to sir or madam. Sensei is used for teachers or people of scholarly learning. I sometimes jokingly call my youngest sister Pearly Saba, Saba in this case meaning mackerel. Although honorifics are widely used, there are many informal situations in which Japanese people don't use honorifics. A teacher addressing a student, for example, is a social dynamic in which one sometimes might not use an honorific. In your own group of close friends or towards your immediate family, you might also elect not to use honorifics as it feels natural to do so amongst the people you're most comfortable with. But it is not this way in Korea. In South Korea, the use of honorifics even in informal situations is quite normal. If you spend any
This type of incidents has happened many times in Korean pilots involved. It's actually pretty crazy. The government came in and gave special training to the pilots to ensure this type of power conflict doesn't happen anymore. The type of exchange here also occurs between Korean pilots and non-Korean pilots that cause miscommunication in those plane crashes. What the fuck?
amount of time living in Korea and getting to know Korean people, inevitably you will be asked how old you are, as your age is critically important in determining the deference you are expected to provide to other people and the deference you receive, even amongst your friends. You might not even use a person's first name out of deference. In a friend group, every older male is hyung if you are male or oppa if you are female. Both words translate roughly to older brother. If you have any Korean friends who have moved from Korea to your non-Korean country, you might have noticed that it's very hard to get them to break the habit of hyunging and oppaing. The expectations of hierarchy in Korea are very strict, even by East Asian standards. Why is that? How did this happen? And what does any of this have to do with gender wars in gacha games? Well, my friends, this has everything to do with gender wars in gacha games. But before we dive
He's answering your question. Oh my God, there's more context.
Let's go back for a moment to our gacha drama. Ishmael's wetsuit was completely contrary to the expectations of the Korean gacha game community. This is not a true summer skin, they said. This is a joke. This is a prank. This is a malicious act. It has to be. The wetsuit design couldn't possibly be the work of a man. After all, no self-respecting Korean man would make something this subservient to the interests of feminists, especially not an artist who works on gacha art, right? As such, this artist must be a woman, and unlike other gacha artist women who happily draw what they are told to draw, or better yet, are expected to draw, this woman has bucked the status quo. We are on the lookout for a feminist. And not just a feminist, but a radical, a revolutionary. How else could this wetsuit art have ever happened? Each allegation was more severe than the last and blown out of proportion, often with the intention merely to troll. And none of the accusations
The fucking Grums in Korea is just sitting around absolutely glazing in all of the glory with his successful movement. He got so much motion. Korean Grums got so much motion, dude. It's crazy.
were backed up by any evidence other than assumption. The players demanded action against this radical feminist, and so they sought her out. Who is the artist in charge of these character CGs? Where is she? Well, she turned out to be a he. The designer of Wetsuit Ishmael and the artist were both men. Disillusioned,
I bet they didn't believe it.
and perhaps slightly embarrassed, the angry mob dissolved. The artist in question isn't a woman and thereby isn't a feminist. He's just some guy with bad taste. But this was not the end, as people were still angry about the outfit itself.
Yep.
It was about who the developers seemed to be prioritizing. They were listening to women on Twitter and not to the men who were actually playing their game and giving them money. The incident had been caught up in the larger Korean gender war. Well, if the mob could not find a witch, they would make one, and their target was a different Limbus Company artist who goes by the alias Vel Mori. Vel Mori was a story illustrator at Limbus Company, but she did not design Wetsuit Ishmael. In fact, by all accounts, Vel Mori had absolutely nothing to do with Wetsuit Ishmael whatsoever. But Vel Mori is a woman, and Vel Mori had some history, deleted retweets of a half-decade-old archive from long before she had started working for Project Moon. So the angry mob had found its target, a vent for their frustrations, a cog in the machine not performing as it's supposed to. A woman who happened to be an artist, working for Limbus Company, who had many years prior retweeted and then subsequently deleted a handful of feminist tweets. Even if she had nothing to do with the wetsuit, the mob argued, her radical feminism warranted her termination as per Project Moon's own stated policy.
Yo, I think we need a neuter, man. Like, if you behave like this online, you have to get neutered. Like, you just, straight up. That's crazy. Oh my God. Oh my fucking God. Oh my God. How are we going to fix this? Oh my God, dude. I feel like we're looking at America's future too. And in some ways, what is happening in America right now as it stands.
The usual
They consider this emoji a hate symbol now? This? Oh God, I'm getting fucking radfemmed. I'm getting radfemmed out the wazoo right now. Oh my Lord. Oh my Lord. I'm turning into a radfem.
internet witch hunt behavior ensued. Project Moon developers received death threats and their games were review bombed into oblivion. But the situation escalated. More accusations poured in concerning Vel Mori's involvement in radical feminism, and as the anger boiled over, a group of Limbus Company players went to Project Moon's physical offices and issued their demands, refusing to leave until they were able to talk directly to the developers themselves. And for reasons unknown, Project Moon's developers caved and allowed the protesters into their physical offices. It was there that the protesters allegedly gave the Project Moon team
big mistake.
a list of their demands, and allegedly also issued threats of physical violence. Not long after the angry mob departed, Project Moon released a statement on Twitter apologizing to its players for many different issues, including technical errors, performance bugs, unintended nerfs, and more. The initial statement received a follow-up statement from Project Moon's director, which appeared to fire Vel Mori due to her ideology, and confirmed that Vel Mori's artwork would no longer be featured in the game. A victory for the boys. We got everything we wanted out of our capital.
Yeah, they did a Gooner January 6th, dude. They did a Gooner January 6th. Oh my God. Oh my God. Bro, they're fucking feral. This is, oh my God. How do you fix this? This is crazy. Okay. I'm gonna take a deep breath here and eyes on the prize, okay? I think a lot of this kind of division that happens in society happens because class politics is completely fucking destroyed. In a place like Korea, if you look at the actual historical context, if you want to look at a solution to it or how we actually arrived at this, and I'm shocked that the History Channel is not referencing this, it still goes back to American intervention. It goes back to the Korean War. It goes back to the Korean military dictatorship that forcibly destroyed any semblance of class consciousness, any semblance of class consciousness in South Korea. Okay? Labor movements were crushed violently, like mass purges, straight up mass killings. He talks about this too, by the way. Oh, thank God. Okay, I was going to say, yes, South Korea, until not that long ago, for those of you who don't know, South Korea was a fascist military dictatorship. And then that fascist military dictatorship turned into 6 families in a trench coat that is a hyper-capitalist dystopia now. And as a consequence of that, like, beauty standards have gotten completely fucking out of control. Their work culture is insane. Their suicide rate is higher than Japan. Okay. And it is an incredibly reactionary country in many ways. And they're suffering from low birth rates, obviously. That's a major problem. It's a major factor. And I think that when your housing prices are completely unsustainable, when your housing prices are completely out of control, when you are a hyper-capitalist dystopian society where there's unimaginable amounts of income inequality, and you're super materialistic, and I don't mean like materialist in the Marxian sense, I think that you end up looking for different villains in the exact same way that we vilify, maybe not women as much. We still do a healthy number of that, a healthy bit of that, but we vilify undocumented migrants and trans people and yada, yada, yada here in this country. Like they have decided that the real villains are actually women. Part of that, I think, the contributing factor to that probably is also the military draft. That is a direct and real gender disparity, I guess, in the eyes of a lot of South Korean men. So they look at it as like, we have to serve in the military. We can't get a job without compulsory service. And ultimately they just like, their understanding of the world is so fundamentally broken. Oh no, not having women in combat? What the fuck does that mean? One of the least compelling parts of leftist discourse is all or most of the oppression will disappear when capitalism is dismantled. People are angrier when they're poor and powerless, but I think it comes off as idealistic to reduce it all to class. What? There's never been a moment where I have said that all matter of hate will be dismantled, or all matter of oppression will be dismantled if capitalism is dismantled. That's not a thing that I've ever mentioned at all, as a matter of fact. It's more, first of all, there is no easy solution. Although everything is intertwined with one another, there is no one singular solution. And the goal there is to at least fix some of the underlying material problems so that it's easier to, change society dramatically in a way that ensures positive results. Okay, I don't think anybody personally says like, no, racism goes away when capitalism goes away, or maybe some people do. They're just perhaps a little delusional, but
riot, including the burning of our witch. Sure, we have to endure that wetsuit skin, but maybe in the future we'll get some looter skins now that the devs know who is in charge. But alas, this was no victory. The firing of Velmori changed everything. The wider world became exposed to this.
Stop analyzing the Korean culture like you've lived in it. Come on, man. Wait, what? OMG, stop. You're right. I shouldn't learn about it either from a guy who's at least offering some historical context. You're right.
Story, and was not at all sympathetic to the plight of the Korean male gacha gamers. Even when the situation was presented in its most favorable light to casual observers, their behavior seemed preposterous, immature, and entitled. In enforcing their demands on Project Moon, the gacha gamer men had fallen into a trap. Velmori became a martyr.
The finger pinch became a hate symbol around 2017 because Korean feminists started using it against men after a report came out that Korean men average smaller dick sizes, internationally speaking. The symbol was a reaction to a series of scandals regarding men filming inside of women's restrooms. Oh my God.
The hierarchical systems in Korea that exist today have ancient roots. These hierarchical systems began, arguably, as Confucianism crept into Korean politics and culture vis-a-vis China, starting as early as 372 AD with the founding of the Confucian Taehak school in the kingdom of Goguryeo, and continuing through the unified Silla period in the year 682, which saw the founding of the Gukhak school. Confucian schools like these became the preeminent places of learning in Korea, and Confucianism established itself as a dominant philosophy to Buddhism. The influence of Buddhism in Korea reached its apex during the Goryeo dynasty. Not to be confused
on YouTube, Twitch streaming is over.
Later Goryeo kings, such as King Sunjong, seeing Confucianism's centralizing power, suppressed the practice of Buddhism in favor of Confucianism. This trend then exploded during the Joseon dynasty, where Confucianism was elevated to the official ideology of the state. But the Confucianism that the Joseon dynasty adopted was of a very specific school known as Neo-Confucianism. Now, Neo-Confucianism developed in...
I remember that you were talking about it with a bit too much confidence, like you know 100% what you're talking about. I mean, yes, some of the things I'm talking about are universal. Like, and I do know a little bit about Korean history. It's not like I said I didn't know anything about Korea. What the fuck? I'm just adding some feedback of what I do know, which I'm sure he will address in a second anyway. God, what is wrong with you guys, man?
In part
Holy
as
shit,
a
shut the
retort
fuck
to
up.
Buddhism, which had also become the dominant ideology in Tang China, just as it was in Korea and Japan. This is going to be an extreme simplification, but where Buddhism teaches self-cultivation for the individual purpose of enlightenment, Neo-Confucianism purports that self-cultivation should not merely be a means to individual enlightenment, but also a mechanic by which one can contribute to a harmonious society. It's not just you, it's not just me, it's us, and we must achieve harmony together. Now, Neo-Confucianism had a lot of benefits for China and Korea. It was a more rational ideology than Buddhism, and its focus on the practical matter of statesmanship as opposed to personal spiritual enlightenment led to the establishment of more schools of learning as opposed to temples of worship, and the uplifting of ethics as a guiding principle of family and government. But Neo-Confucianism was not without its drawbacks, and issues in the underlying philosophy of Neo-Confucianism led to subsequent reformist thinkers such as Yang Mingzi, who developed, for example, the philosophical principle of I think, therefore I am, over a century prior to René Descartes. Yang Mingzi is considered one of the great masters of Confucianism in China and Japan. It's even been said that Yang Mingzi's teachings heavily inspired the Japanese philosophy of Bushido. But these reforms never really made it to Korea, and Yang Mingzi does not hold the same prestige in Korea as he does in China or Japan. Why? Well, it's because the Korean state threw itself wholeheartedly into Neo-Confucianism, so much so that it developed its own independent schools of Neo-Confucian thought, separate from what was emerging in China. Where China had Yang Mingzi, Korea had Yi Huang, known better perhaps as Togye, and Yi, also known as Yulgo. Togye and Yang Mingzi were contemporaries. They lived at the same time period, the early 1500s. If you watch the video I made on Christian games, do you recall how American Calvinists, Puritans, were so deeply entrenched in their beliefs that their Calvinism failed to develop as Dutch Calvinism did? How American Protestantism branched away from Protestantism at large and thus failed to develop Neo-Calvinist theology as a counterweight to Calvinist Puritanism? Korean Neo-Confucianism developed very much in that same vein, as Ming Dynasty China evolved its Neo-Confucianism, thereby arguably softening the strict hierarchical systems that come with Neo-Confucianism. Korea doubled down. Hyun-Sun Lee, a lecturer at the Department of Philosophy at Seoul National University, states in his work, Yi Huang and Yi's interpretation of the Taiji Tusu, focusing on their theories of Li Qi, quoting the traditional work Annals of the Joseon Dynasty. Yi Huang took to heart that China lost its tradition of Dohak, or authentic Neo-Confucianism. In other words, Yi Huang, the preeminent Korean Neo-Confucianist scholar, utterly rejected Chinese developments in ideology in favor of a pure Neo-Confucianism. You may have noticed that I never described what Neo-Confucianists actually believe outside of their emphasis on hierarchy, and I haven't done this because it wouldn't make any sense to you at all. It's like trying to read and understand Hegel before reading Kant, but worse by a factor of centuries. Let me read you a snippet from the article we just discussed to give you an example. Zushi claims that the Wuji and the Taiji are not separate things. He interprets the above phrase as formless but with Li.
Okay, I think there's too much context now, bro. I swear to God, he's doing too much context. Okay, this is crazy.
And describes it as the substance, what is above form. Skipping ahead. Whereas the Wuji and the Taiji mean the same thing, the Taiji and the Yin Yang are to be clearly distinguished. In other words, they are explained as belonging, respectively, to Li and Qi. I'll stop there, you get it. I haven't explained Neo-Confucianism in full because I can't, but what I can tell you is that Neo-Confucianism puts an enormous emphasis on hierarchy as a stabilizing force of societal harmony. Yi Huang, the Korean master we discussed, who felt that Ming China had lost true Neo-Confucianism, was himself critiqued by Yi, also known as Yulgo. Yi felt that a more physical, more material approach to Confucianism was necessary. Self-cultivation, knowing oneself, one's place, one's capacities, are directly relevant to proper administration. In other words, Yi's teachings deepened the physical bonds between the state and Confucianism. Not unlike in Japan and China, a rigid social hierarchy emerged in Korea.
Bro went back to the Big Bang to be like, let me explain the context of how we arrived at the nation state of Korea to begin with. Like, that's crazy. He's like, you can't address anything until you talk about the theory of evolution. Like, he's like, let's go back a little bit in time, and a little bit is like literally the year 8, okay? That's not a little bit, man. What the fuck? No, he literally said 372 AD.
A caste system of sorts, in which the king sat on top followed by civil leaders and military officers, then learned peoples, laborers, etc. Unlike China and Japan, however, this system was more rigid in its execution. This formal system was abolished in 1894, but the underlying hierarchical nature of Korean society was deeply embedded into the Korean psyche, and unlike in China or Japan, there would be no uprooting of this hierarchical system through a century of conflict with the West. China had the Opium Wars and the Self-Strengthening Movement and the Boxer Rebellion and much more, which did a lot to reduce the influence of Confucianism over China. And much of that on the Chinese side was intentional attempts to westernize. Likewise, in Japan, you had...
Yeah, he said the wetsuit isn't really compatible with my view of Lee's Neo-Confucianism. Yeah, this is leftist memes be like. Let me take you to a time back when...
Commodore Perry, the Boshin War, the Meiji Restoration, etc., which eroded the influence of Confucianism in Japan. But you will note, of course, that Confucianism was never eradicated. Strict adherence to Confucian hierarchy and customs remains in both China and Japan to this day. One of these countries is literally communist, and yet still has Confucian hierarchical values built into its society. Korea is both the most historically Confucian state, while also having had the least erosion of that Confucianism through external or internal intervention. And it was Japan, and not a Western power, that interfered most in Korea's modern cultural development. Although Korea itself was arguably forced out of its isolationism by, surprise, surprise, the United States. Let me explain. The Koreans call it Shinmyeongyo, the Western disturbance during the Shimi year. In 1866, an American merchant ship called the SS General Sherman steamed up the Taedong River and attempted to illegally force the Koreans to trade. After some miscommunication and ignored demands, the Koreans dispatched a naval contingent to destroy the American ship.
Yeah, Westerners did that a whole lot, including the other example that he was giving about Japan.
And execute the sailors aboard in a punitive mission, as the Koreans thought that the American ship was actually a French ship. Look, it's a long story. The naval contingent was like something out of Age of Empires 2, 9 fire ships and a turtle ship. This fleet successfully brought down the SS General Sherman, and the sailors were captured by civilians on the shore and executed. A few years later, in 1871, the Americans dispatched a small fleet to investigate the missing SS General Sherman. The Koreans had a strict law at the time that no foreign ships could sail up the Han River. The Americans requested access to the Han River to ostensibly investigate the General Sherman, and when the Koreans said no, the Americans peacefully and cooperatively turned around and left. No, just kidding. Of course, the Americans ignored the order and steamed up the Han River. The Koreans opened fire but didn't do much damage, perhaps intentionally so. The US then demanded an apology for violating Korea's sovereignty, as is tradition. The United States gave the Koreans 10 days to apologize, and when they didn't, because why would they, the Americans opened fire and moved to capture the fortress of Gwanseong Garrison. After a substantial naval bombardment, the Americans deposited roughly 650 sailors and Marines who marched on the fortress, capturing it. The Americans fielded the Remington rolling block carbine. The Koreans fought back with primitive matchlocks. At the end of the conflict, the Americans had suffered 3 killed and 10 wounded, and had killed 243 people by the American estimate, and around
also fucking classic.
350 people by the Korean estimate. The Americans then attempted to persuade the Koreans to negotiate again for trade, which they naturally declined. As Korean reinforcements began to arrive, the US fleet, realizing it was outgunned, left for China on July 3rd. But the brazen American attack had inspired a nearby rising power. A power that was trying to copy Western tactics and technology and ideology as much as it possibly could. That power being Japan. Japan, inspired by the American attack and remembering how their own isolation was forcibly ended by American warships, approached Ganghwa Island with its military in 1876.
That game was such a dud, by the way. Made me kind of sad. What's the name of that fucking American general? The real historic American general, admiral? The game that he's, Matthew Perry. Rise of Ronin is the game that he's using footage from.
In order to purposefully provoke a Korean response, before then issuing a blockade of the region with their navy and demanding an unequal trade treaty under these familiar terms, ones that they learned from their own encounter with the United States. Give us what we want or be subject to incredible violence. And the Koreans complied, signing the first of many unequal treaties with Japan. This unequal treaty paved the way for other nations to force trade upon Korea, and before long, just like in China, just like in Japan, modern direct conflict with traditional Confucian systems of government. But unlike in China or Japan, that process was cut fatally short. Tensions were rising between China and Japan, and the consequences of massive trade inflow through unequal treaties in Korea had led to political turmoil and famine. In Korea proper, the conflict between Neo-Confucians and the uncontrolled influx of Western values and technology was also reaching a fever pitch, which erupted into the Donghak Peasant Revolution. Donghak means Eastern learning. It was part religion, part Neo-Confucianist school, and it directly opposed Seohak, meaning Western learning. King Gojong, the last king of the Joseon dynasty, requested aid from China to suppress the rebellion. The Japanese, fearing that they would lose influence, sent their own soldiers without Korea's consent. As the rebellion came to an end, Korea demanded the immediate departure of Japanese soldiers, which the Japanese refused. In July of 1894, Japan made its move, occupying the royal palace in Seoul and taking King Gojong prisoner. Before July had even ended, the Japanese had replaced members of the Korean government with pro-Japanese puppets. The Sino-Japanese War was about to begin, and the Russo-Japanese War loomed over the horizon. But the annexation of Korea by Imperial Japan was already underway.
Yeah, Imperial Japan is wild. Just an unstoppable, maddening force of evil all across the far reaches of Japanese empire.
Korea did not get to experience a Meiji restoration or a self-strengthening movement from beginning to end, as it simply didn't have the time. The American attack occurred in 1871. The Japanese forcing open Korea occurred in 1876. And by 1894, less than 20 years after being forced open for trade, Korea was already under threat of annexation by Japan. In the year 1910, Japan formalized its annexation of Korea with the signing of the Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty. The Japanese occupation of Korea was brutal. The suffering of the Korean people, unimaginable. The horrors of the occupation are beyond the scope of this video, but I'll leave some reading in the description for you if you'd like to learn more. One of the most grotesque of Japan's inflictions upon Korea was the systematic eradication of Korean culture. The Japanese banned the Korean language, replacing it with Japanese. They attempted to eliminate the use of Korean names. They tried to change the very fabric of Korean history so as to assimilate the Korean people more easily. But as is evident, the Japanese did not succeed in eradicating Korean culture. The Japanese attempt at cultural eradication actually caused the Koreans to entrench their culture, to preserve it by any means necessary. As such, Korean culture thrives to this very day brighter than ever, with each Korean generally quite proud of his or her cultural heritage and eager to share it with the world. Just as Korean culture at large survived Japanese annexation, however, so too did Korean Neo-Confucianism. And although the influence of this Neo-Confucianism deteriorated very substantially under Japanese rule, it was never completely quashed. For all of their imperialism and westernization, the Japanese imperial government was deeply hierarchical, with its own legitimacy tied inseparably to Bushido. You will recall that Neo-Confucianist philosophy had a lot of influence on Bushido. Bushido built upon the foundations of Neo-Confucianism, and Imperial Japan was built on Bushido. As such, Neo-Confucianism, and specifically Korean Puritan Neo-Confucianism, became deeply internalized in Korea to a much greater extent than it did in China or Japan. Citing here the Routledge Handbook on East Asian Politics, South Koreans believe their country not only as closer to China than Japan, but in administrative culture and familism, more Confucian than China. And indeed, in post-war Korea, this strict adherence to hierarchy was utilized in a big way to rein in the people and resolve the chaos of the post-war era. Quoting here from the book Economic Development in the Republic of Korea, proper order between senior and junior and loyalty to the state was used to be utility for the maintenance of Park's, referring to South Korean President Park Chung-hee's, autocratic political regime.
Throughout Western and Eastern intervention, Korean understanding of Confucianism has developed and only hardened, okay? And that's why they have such strict rules about hierarchy. That's it. That entire process is basically reduced to what I just explained.
To summarize what we've just discussed succinctly, citing again from Economic Development in the Republic of Korea, despite their efforts at modernizing—
Wait, what the fuck? This video is almost over. Oh my God, the actual video is part 2? We got fucking debated. It doesn't even say part 1. And part 2 is so much longer. Gacha drama in the Korean gender war. We are living in a Megalia world, the house that rebuilt, the great dictator, and I am a Megalia girl, death of Park and the modern Korean political cycle, a Gacha drama to end all others, the suffering of Korean men. And okay, I want to see just this part.
It's hard.
I want to see the Gacha drama, and then I want to see the suffering of Korean men.
On or about November 23rd, 2023. Nexon, the developer and publisher of Maple Story, the very same Nexon who fired or otherwise let go of voice actress Kim Jae.
If there's a part 3, I'm not watching this. Okay, there isn't. Oh my God, there's also an infamous 4D movement explainer from Asian Boss, which we can watch too.
Released an animated trailer promoting—
No, it's actually this is super intelligent and also very good. It's chock full of good stuff. What is this? The Joker 2 movie is making Korean men angry. In Korea, it has become a trend among incels. The sit-in seats reserved for pregnant women as a way to show off their so-called brave anti-feminist stance on predominantly male websites. I was so pissed off after watching the Joker movie that I sat in the subway seat reserved for pregnant women. I'm so angry right now, I can't keep my sanity. When I get home, I'm going to wet the bed. No, I've heard the pregnant women shit before, by the way. It sounds fake, but it's not. That's why I said it's like Nick Fuentes style incels, dude. And just as pathetic, if not more pathetic. I don't know what percentage of Korean men subscribe to this, but there's clearly a lot of Korean men that at least feel comfortable doing this in broad daylight and then get like reinforcement from the stupid fucking forums that they frequent. And it's weird, chat. When I tell you shit is fucked up, I don't know how to describe it. Online spaces are so male dominated. It's reported that Tinder in Korea is 94% male to 6% women. If you want to understand why like the 4B movement exists in Korea, this is it. Okay. Grindr has less than that, by the way. Master Shake, crash out, bro. It's like, yeah. When I first encountered the 4B movement, I was immediately like, what the fuck is this? This is not productive. This is dumb. And then we dove a little bit deeper into the gender wars in Korea, and I very quickly found out, oh, it's not normal at all. I understand it. I think it's vigilantism, and of course it's born out of systemic inequalities that the government is not choosing to address at all. Okay, so it's like, you know how I talk about how terrorism is born out of like acts of terror is born out of like not having any other options. Like nobody wants to fucking blow themselves up. Okay, they do that because that's like the final thing that you can do, where you have some sense of control over your life. Okay, where you feel like I'm going to die no matter what, and this is how I'm choosing to die. Obviously, it's not like the same level. It's not the same severity. But if society is like routinely undermining you, and you are just experiencing tremendous amounts of oppression, and there is seemingly no way out of it, then yeah, you're going to inevitably be like, okay, I'm just not even being around men. That's not entirely true, as it doesn't explain zealous martyrdom. In the context of which I explain it, it does make sense. Okay? You're comparing it to like a fucking incel doing a school shooting, okay? And then killing themselves. That's not what I'm talking about. Not all terrorism is a final act coming from a moment of desperation and wanting to. It's not always going to be. There's not always going to be a shit ton of logic involved in this. Okay. Most Korean women don't know what the 4B movement is. It's severely blown out of proportion. Most Korean women don't even like it. Yeah, I don't necessarily care about the 4B movement as much. I know that's like the highlight or the high note. It's the tip of the iceberg that everybody pays attention to. That still doesn't change the gender war dynamic that very much seemingly exists in Korea and is like born out of the underlying inequalities. You notice how in 3/4 of the region, the women are moving further and further steeply in direction, but in South Korea, look, a wide ideology gap is opening up between young men and young women in countries across the world. Holy fuck, look at the men. Just straight up falling off the cliff, dude. Oh my lord. Like, I think the 4B movement is a manifestation of all the anger and resentment that people feel when they feel like the systems have completely cast them aside. Understandable, considering you have an incel president in South Korea. But having said that, there is still very much a major problem here. And I think the systems are more important to hyper focus on rather than the way women have decided to fight against it. If that makes it, or some women have decided to fight against it. Anyway, let's continue.
An important new patch which remastered the game's angelic trailer is beautifully animated and terribly cute, but it would soon find itself at the very center of a new crisis. The Korean Gacha men, still on high alert due to the recency of the Ishmael wetsuit incident, discovered a few frames of animation in which Angelic Buster appeared.
How's my favorite anti-Semitic doing? Hate any Jewish people today? First of all, why the fuck do you have a favorite anti-Semitic? Cry more. Red Wave. I'm worn out from smiling today. Bro's a fucking Trump-supporting right-winger, and he's over here trying to fucking call me an anti-Semite. This is what I'm going to do to him, okay? This. I like this. This is cool. Hey, chatter. This is you, okay? This right here. This is sick. Yeah, go piss your bed to own the libs, dude.
To be making the pinching symbol of Megalia, the little C. You can see it for one frame in the intro of the animation and once more later as Angelic Buster is spinning. A firestorm erupts, and a similar song and dance occurs. This briefly visible pinching motion must be the work of a radical feminist. As
like, they talk about misandry as a serious subject. Oh my god. Oh my god. They're so cooked. Bro, Korean media is so cooked. Oh my god. People are unironically talking about misandry. Oh my god. Be a man. 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 Be a man.
Only a radical feminist would include this dog whistle, this anti-male, hate speech, slur in an animation. All eyes were on the animation studio that created the trailer, Studio Potpourri, also known as Studio Root. And as the chauvinists dug deeper looking into Studio Potpourri's past animations, something became very clear. The hand pinch signs were everywhere. in Korean games ranging from MapleStory to Blue Archive, from Epic 7 to Dungeon Fighter, where Studio Pupuri was. There too was the pinch. The first target that the angry mob lashed out at was Nade, the vocalist for the song in the animation. She had retweeted old tweets that were in support of Kim Jae-young back in 2016, which was enough to paint her as a misandrist, a man-hater. But Nare didn't draw anything, she was a vocalist, not an animator. So someone else put the pinch into the animation, right? Well, the next target was a woman named Taeso, an animator and team leader at Studio Pupuri. She had an old tweet in which she stated that she would never stop being a feminist, even though she'd had her social media accounts blocked for being offensive towards men. She stated further that she will always continue to be a feminist, stealthily and subtly. Most damning of all, she also liked a tweet that was critical of Limbus Company's firing of Vel Mori. Nexon and Studio Pupuri were inundated with angry complaints, and as was the case with Nexon,
Bro, women are getting fired for being remotely pro-feminist. That country is cooked. It's crazy. Why are you all right with chat spamming such hurtful racism against Korean men? You know the context, yet you still encourage it. Chat is mostly white. It is literally promoting racism and false stereotypes. Wait, what? This right here is not about Korean men. I'm calling a fucking right-wing American Republican, you know, using this to make fun of a right-wing American. Yes, the pinching thing is racist. Wait, what? No, I'm saying he has a little dick. The fuck are you talking about? Why are you getting mad? What the fuck? Why is that racist to say someone has a little ass dick? What the fuck? Am I misunderstanding something? The issue also is that South Korean netizens have started doing these witch hunts against any and all women who they consider to be feminists. It's gotten to a degree where being called a feminist can result in a woman being fired and even shunned from their communities or workplaces. Even some women-only colleges are being threatened into becoming co-ed when they have always been historically women-only. Oh my God. Not defending him, but it's an Asian stereotype. Okay, this is crazy. Hey guys, I'm not like, this has nothing to do with Korean people's penises. What the fuck? Oh my God. Chatters got made. You made the chat and what? Chatters got mad. You and chat made a sign that targets misogynistic men. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'm probably going to I'm probably if I see little dick energy from a misogynistic chatter, I'm probably gonna use it. Finger pinching conspiracy is an anti-feminist conspiracy theory that originated in South Korea and claims there's a deliberate plot to spread and promote misandry through hand gesture imagery. It asserts that radical feminism groups have propagated the hidden message to mock small penises. Bro, it's got his own Wikipedia page. Oh my God. What the fuck? What the fuck? And the 4B feminist movement is full of turfs. I mean, that's not shocking, but the sign is popularized in Korea. Of course, not racist against Koreans because it originated from there. Lamau's so dumb. Dude, it first gained prominence in, dude, did they Streisand effect this into becoming like a thing? By considering that this is like actually making a mockery of like some Korean incels, they just ended up Streisand affecting it, and it's kind of like, I mean, it's a very cool, it's a cool thing to do. Watch the video, look at problematic images. This is that, dude. That's wrong. It's Katie's celebration, and he says mini. I know, or you do this. That's the other thing. You do one of these, like you do this, like all the way to the ground to show how tiny of a size you are. Like you can't, you're too small. You're just too small. What? 100 Thieves? League of Legends got an emote you could get where a character, Akali, was doing the pinching hand. They were forced to change after what I think was a backlash of the gesture. Bro, what the fuck? Dude, I'm learning so much cool shit today. It's pretty crazy. What the fuck? One of my K-pop idols got canceled for showing a picture of a feminist book. Dude, what are you guys saying? What are you saying? You can get canceled for showing like interest in feminism? What are you saying? I can't. You guys are joking. You must be joking. This is a new well that we have unearthed that I wish I did not know about, kind of. Like, while on the one hand, I'm excited about learning new things, but also on the other hand, I'm like, damn, dude, this is an endless well of depravity. What the fuck? Like, the fact that you can be canceled for being like, yeah, women are equal to men. Here is some literature that suggests this reality is a cancelable offense is fucking nuts. They try to cancel Irene, but they can't keep a bad bitch down. People were burning pics of her. Oh my God. Kevin Durant supporting the 4B movement. Kevin Durant should, I saw that tweet about him like making money off Gaza.
Buddy Cam Thomas on him. Telling Nurkic, get out of here. I want this. Durant Working Thomas off one leg, banks it in, plus the foul. And
damn, he did it. That's crazy. Fuck, he did it so fast. He knew it was an inappropriate gesture, so he did it so fast I can't even catch it. New form of microaggression? Yo, I can't believe this, bro.
In 2016 and with Limbus Company, both Nexon and Studio Pupuri immediately capitulated. The Angelic Buster trailer was released on November 23rd, by 2 a.m. on November 25th. Just 2 days after the initial trailer was released, MapleStory, Dungeon Fighter, Blue Archive, and other implicated games each offered an apology, validating the claims being made that they had located in.
Why are these fucking institutions apologizing to the most insane nerds, bro? Oh my God. Oh my God. This is what's going to happen to fucking Twitch and every other platform when the IHRA definition passes. And then like every fucking organization comes after every platform that allows anti-Zionist commentary, which will be immediately branded as anti-Semitic. Oh my Lord.
Inappropriate expressions, and that they would take necessary action. Kim Chung-sop, the director of MapleStory at Nexon, held a live stream press conference in which he reassured the angry MapleStory players that we will never allow a culture that publicly expresses hatred towards others and those who enjoy such a culture to defame. On November 26th, Studio Pupuri published its own apology in which it appeared to admit fault and offered the angry mob exactly what it wished for: complete and utter capitulation and validation of their claims of foul play. The target of the mob's anger, Teso, was forbidden from working.
The small symbol is also like such a weird self-own because like you're basically, if you get mad at that, you're basically saying like, I have a small dick. You know what I mean? Like, why are you, what? Like, this has nothing to do with you, brother. Like, or it shouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, why are you basically saying like, wow, it's really fucked up that you said I have a small dick. Like, I'm really insecure about that. Like, what? What the fuck? Holy shit. And for the record, before people say, I mean, some people do have small peepees. Yeah, they do. Okay. But what you make of it is what matters. Okay. Like when I talk about divorced dads, there's a shit ton of men who are divorced, but my uncle, real uncle, Sam Cedar, also is. Notice how notice how he does not exude divorced dad energy, because it's about vibes, not about the actual situation in and of itself. Elon Musk, Destiny, okay, and numerous other people like Kanye West exuding divorced dad energy. Uncle Sam, on the other hand, does not. And the same goes for having a small peepee, okay? Same goes for the difference between a manlet and a short king. The way it works is that men can say, imagine making fun of a woman's body, totally lacks broader social analysis. Yeah, but they do make fun of women's bodies. What the fuck? After this is about instituting control over what women can and can't do or can and can't say, including but not limited to. It's not even fuck what you want to say about women's bodies, which they do all the time. It seems like they won't even let women be like, I'm a feminist. That's like way worse than even objectifying women or telling women what they can and can't do. They're now saying you can't even think that you are equal. What the fuck? It's in your dating sim too? Wait, what? Oh my, wait, what is this website? Did you just find is this an incel website? They're claiming that this is actually secretly, hey yo, this shit is crazy. God damn, I'm learning so much.
Working on further promotional videos. This apology was deemed insufficient though, as Teso was not outright fired. Studio Pupuri was accused of a false placation. An angry mob allegedly went to their offices, taking pictures and spying on their employees. The situation was getting dangerous, and Studio Pupuri could do no more without risking their safety. On November 27th, Studio Pupuri issued a second apology and stated that the animator in question, Teso, would not be fired but would instead resign. This apology and the firing was quickly retracted, but it was too late.
Yeah, the getting canceled for being a feminist is way worse than being objectified, lol. You can look, but don't take my rights away. No, I'm just saying, like, it's one step above that. You know what I mean? Like, they've moved beyond being like what women can and can't wear, which still comes back to like obviously women being servile and being considered like less than men. But now they're like, you also can't even advocate for your equality. Like, that's insane.
The damage was done. You can imagine what happened next.
게임 홍보 영상에서 남성 혐오를 상징하는
한 애니메이션 스튜디오가
주로 알려진 혹은 저희가 파악한 모든 영상들은
사과했는데 집회까지 열며 반발했습니다.
회사의 물건을 회복이 불가능한 경우도 있었습니다.
경제적 기반을 위협당하고 있다고 주장했습니다.
또 게임 문화 속 케빈이점 혐오 몰이를
맡긴 다른 게임 제작진도 진상
Bro, oh my god, they're blurring it. They're blurring it on TV. Like as in it's hate speech. Oh my god. Oh my god. Chat. This is literally like if there was like enough people that were just willing and able to go out the bat for flat eartherism, and then they said that like it's ableist if you fucking, I don't know, attack us for believing the earth is flat, and then they just like forced their will upon the broader society, and then everyone had to just basically like, you had to censor the globe, you had to start teaching that the earth was flat. Like this is the most insane thing I've ever seen. It's crazy.
영상을 맡긴 넥슨의야말로 성혐오 논란에 휩싸였습니다. 게임사와 영상 제작사 모두 적극 사과를 했지만 여성계는 억지 논란이라고 반발하고 있습니다. 오늘 여성계에 올라온
Once again, the controversy was so severe that it made Korean national news with a much more in-depth segment this time. On November 30th, a week after the Angelic Buster trailer was released, 3 days after Tae-so's resignation, an incredibly unsurprising discovery was made. After a media investigation, it was reported that the animator who drew the controversial Angelic Buster scenes was a man in his 40s. Quoting now a major newspaper, Gyeongyang Shinmun's article Maple Index Finger Storyboard Drawn by a Man, as a result of coverage by the Gyeongyang Shinmun on the 30th, it was confirmed that the original storyboard for the video in question was handled by Mr. A male animator in his 40s from a company other than Studio Pupuri. Mr. A was an additional manpower sought due to the urgent deadline presented by Nexon. Basically, everyone involved in this animation, it turns out, was male, and industry officials found that it was impossible for a malicious edit to have occurred, adding a controversial frame. But that didn't stop the harassment, and the Gyeongyang Shinmun confirms that Mr. A, the artist, and Mr. B, the male supervisor in his 50s, were both harassed over their involvement. But just like with Vel Mori, it didn't matter anymore to the men that Tae-so had nothing to do with the finger pinch in the Angelic Buster trailer. If Studio Pupuri has a feminist working in their midst, one who has a stated intention to do feminist things, nothing that they say can be trusted. The women staged protests in front of Nexon's offices, and the men retaliated with threats of violence on social media. Studio Pupuri's employees were harassed endlessly, allegedly receiving threats and hate messages and even having their personal information shared online. Tae-so herself also had her personal information and phone number leaked to the public by angry men. She became a victim.
Bro, this is literally collective schizophrenia, okay? It's so fucked. Dude, if I'm... bro, no disrespect to anybody, but if I'm DPRK and I hear about this, I'll be like, nah, dude, we're not fucking... The demilitarized zone just got fucking a mile longer, okay? I'll be like, no, what the fuck? What the fuck, dude? This is crazy.
Victim of cyberbullying in the form of sexual harassment and death threats.
No unification.
All over some retweets and allegations surrounding art she didn't actually draw. Once again, an innocent woman had been targeted, and an entire company had been brought to heel over something painfully trivial. A few frames of a hand gesture in an animated trailer with no bad intentions behind it. But unlike the Ishmael swimsuit incident, this time, the drama broke containment. The angry men turned their attention to other games, and as many of them came from the Gacha game community, their targets were disproportionately Gacha games. They began tearing apart every single animated trailer, every frame of art, searching for the Megalia pinch.
Dude, this is the problem, okay? You give these fucking freaks an inch, and they will take a fucking arm, okay? Like, that's the issue. You can't let institutions cave and capitulate to fucking freakish monsters, especially when they have not logically arrived at their positions. There is no valid movement here. This is completely fucked. That's it. All you do is galvanize these people. I feel like I'm going insane watching the news unfold, okay? It's like, yeah, what do you expect, dude? What do you fucking expect? When you normalize this kind of behavior, these people are just gonna be like, oh yeah, we gotta kill, we gotta scalp. They're just gonna keep going after women more because there is no real oppression that they're fighting. If there was a valid oppression that they were struggling against, once that oppression was tackled, then they would stop. That's usually how this works. That's why in the aftermath of the abolition of slavery, the violence did not come from newly freed black men and women. It actually came from the Klan, which formed as a way to restore the racial hierarchy. Historically speaking, when the oppressed people actually overcome their oppression through violent struggle, okay, they don't reinforce a new dynamic or a new hierarchy of oppression. They're just like, okay, cool, now we're free. Like, That's it. Great. I love that. But on the inverse of this, if there is no real oppression and no real struggle, and you are simply building a momentum or movement off of pre-existing dynamics, okay, pre-existing methods of mechanisms of oppression, like misogyny in a patriarchal society, when you give them an inch, when institutions bend to their will, they're gonna do more. Yeah, this is like caving to the QAnon freaks and being like, Universal Studios wanted to apologize. Yes, you are right. Tom Hanks is a pedophile. We are very sorry for putting forward the pedophile Tom Hanks for being in the movie. You know, what do you think that would if Universal Studios came out and said that? What do you think would happen? They'd be like, oh, you know who else is a pedophile? Every single person. Look at this message board. We found even more pedophiles.
And very naturally, they found many such pinches. The dev teams of those games were subjected to similar harassment until they too capitulated, editing or removing any instance of art with a possible finger pinch from the Korean version.
That's so funny. They're like, every time, if you have a woman on screen, they have to do this. God forbid. Look at this. This is the way they branded it in Korea. Did this in League of Legends? Yeah, I saw. We already covered it briefly.
Versions of their games, making concessions in order to avoid further harassment and violence. Some dev teams, such as the one at NeoWiz's Brown Dust 2, even acted preemptively, removing any art that could even potentially resemble the Megalian Sea before negative attention found them. I know what most of you are thinking. This is insane. This is crazy. First, these men rioted over a wetsuit, and now they're forcing dev team after dev team, corporation after corporation to apologize and capitulate over anything even vaguely resembling an index finger and thumb forming a C. A position.
No, man, this is not masculinity being volatile. You're wrong. This is 100% like a completely fucked dystopian society. It's a powder keg. Also, the Pope strikes again. He's doing the pinch and he's Hamas. I'm telling you, dude, this only happens if people don't have. I mean, there's so many different factors at play here, but singling out like the volatility of masculinity is incorrect. There's plenty of fucking masculine societies where it doesn't get to this level at all. There's plenty of toxic masculine societies. America has toxic masculinity. America, much like most of the world, is a patriarchal society. This level of this is mania. You have to look at the underlying material issues.
Which, need I remind you, is the resting position of the hand, and is thereby virtually unavoidable. It's easy to look at a situation like this and feel dumbfounded, as we will see even other gacha-playing men sharing similar prurient interests, and culturally adjacent countries like China and Japan by the extremism of the Korean men. But in truth, the anger being vented, the frustrations being expressed towards Project Moon and Valmori and Studio Popuri and Taiso, they aren't really about swimsuits, or finger pinches, or hate symbols. Before we wrap up our gacha drama story, let's finally talk about what life is like in modern South Korea.
Thank you.
Oh
my God.
But
no, he's back to the fucking no. God damn, dude. This guy, bro. Stop. He said, let's talk about modern Korea and went back to Neo-Confucianism. Fuck. I was like, thank God, finally.
Especially Neo-Confucianism. If society is dysfunctional, if society is unharmonious, if it is discordant, some part of the system, some level of the hierarchy must be responsible for that discord. Think back to our Korean Airlines story from part 1. If the glide slope instrument is broken, it must be a GI on the ground who is responsible. In Confucian society, if disharmony arises, ideally whichever level of the hierarchy is responsible for said disharmony is moved back to the righteous and harmonious course by the level of hierarchy directly above them. Employees are corrected by their bosses, children by their parents.
So is Confucianism paired up with patriarchy? Is that what it is? So like women are inherently the lower rank than men. So these guys are all just blaming the women in the caste system because women technically are, underneath them in the caste system. Is that what it is?
If the higher level fails at doing that, the level above them then has the responsibility to take over. If each layer continues to fail, eventually the emperor steers the entire ship of society in the direction that can bring it back to harmony and order, hopefully integrating any necessary social change in the process. But in an extremely Neo-Confucian state, a status quo can emerge which so strongly emphasizes harmony and order that it rejects social change, causing society to
We wanted one question answered, but we're going to leave with a minor in Korean gender studies. Yeah, no ethnic minorities to blame, so they target women instead. Yeah, I guess America is so Confucianist in the way that they look for a permanent underclass that they can blame.
Stagnate. When the top of the hierarchy is especially
It is kind of like American white supremacy.
bureaucratic or incompetent or corrupt or self-serving, disorder gets enveloped by obfuscation, and the underlying problems never get fixed. The problem becomes enveloped, mired in nonsense and misinformation, and moving goalposts and bureaucracy. At the end of all the fighting and mess, social harmony is pulled back into its place without the requisite social change, such that the underlying issues do not get solved. This behavior goes down the ladder from the top. The top of the hierarchy does this to the middle, and the middle does this to the bottom.
We clearly need to import more American soldiers to take the pressure off Korean women. Brother, I'm not lying to you when I say this. That is how they got here, okay? I think that's what made the situation so volatile to begin with, okay? That's a part of the problem, I think.
Each following
Craziest part of this is that despite all this, South Korea had a female president before America.
the lead of the other in the Confucian manner. These issues don't go away though. They're still
Enjoying the video. How about more context about Neo-Confucianism? Bro had to bring it back, dude. He had to bring it back to Neo-Confucianism. We got to talk about the Han River. I'll have you recall in my former video where the American boats were riding up the Han River. Fuck!
there. They merely build in tension. If each time a conflict arises, it is suppressed again without resolution, the tension and subsequent conflict grows larger and larger and larger, until it eventually breaks out of the control of the state, of the society entirely, of the top of the hierarchy, and into open civil war. South Korea has the...
I'm not gonna lie, that was a massive W for Korea. Yeah, maybe we should export more annoying streamers like Johnny Somali that gives Korean men something to hate on. Yeah, that shit was dope. Damn, 5 hearts under one roof with the fried chicken and the fucking beers and the sexy ass ladies, and also the pack watch on Johnny Somali made me feel a certain type of way about South Korea. Turns out I was not, I was, I apologize to the Korean women. I did not know shit was like that. I thought I had a grasp on how shit was. It turns out it's so much worse. With every single time I learn things about like the gender wars in Korea, I'm shocked. It's like learning about stuff that Israel does, where your immediate reaction is like, come on, that's like anti-Semitic. Like you just lied. You just made that up. And you're like, oh my God, that's a real thing that Israel is doing. What the fuck? Holy shit. This is what it feels like learning more and more about South Korea and the gender wars that exist there. Didn't you say you want to be deported there yesterday? I mean, I am a man, so I don't think it would be that bad for me in particular. Let's be real. You know what I mean? I'm not only a man, but I also have a small head and broad shoulders, which I hear, like I said, is a delicacy in South Korea. So aim Korean men at libertarian guys. Yeah. It wasn't until you made that hand sign in the camera. What are they going to do? Fucking beat me? Like, I'm sorry, but I feel like any Korean man who already has like a healthy enough lifestyle that, goes out and fucking works out and shit is not going to be pissed off by this. Okay. Like, I feel like the type of dude that gets pissed off at this is the type of dude that isn't exactly outside. You know what I mean? It's like the same principle with all my fucking haters. I don't really get pushed a lot by random fucking losers in the way that like you would think that there's an outsized amount of hatred online, because most of those dudes just exist online. You don't understand that will come to your house and protest? Yeah, I'll show my dick at them. You guys talked about supporting feminism and they got eaten alive by Korean media? That's crazy.
Highest suicide rate in the developed world, as per the World Health Organization's 2019 estimates. If you look exclusively at the suicide rate amongst women, you will find that South Korea's suicide rate for women is the 4th worst of all countries in the world, surpassing even many struggling developing nations. Japan is somewhat notorious in the West for its problems surrounding depression and suicide, but in South Korea, women commit suicide at twice the rate of women in Japan. In 2019, keep in mind that this is before COVID, a survey conducted by Hankyoreh newspaper showed that amongst young Koreans between the ages of 19 and 34...
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the deepfake porn harassment epidemic in South Korea, which is even crazier, dude. Like, there's so much... I know that stuff, but I didn't realize this shit was also happening.
83% of young women and 70...
Yeah, you want to see a hateful gesture? I'll fucking start windmilling my cock. to all the fucking protesters outside of my house in South Korea, okay?
78% of young men view South Korea as a living hell. Nearly 80% of young women and 72% of young men want to leave South Korea. And this is because, putting aside any gender considerations for the moment, the experiences of Korean young people are incredibly soul-crushing. This article in the Korea Herald, Why Koreans Want to Leave Hell Joseon, quotes sociology professor Lee Byung-hoon, who states that the phenomenon is a reflection of South Koreans of all ages struggling to survive amid a lack of jobs and unstable livelihoods.
Oh, it turns out Hasan wasn't wrong about this assessment. Oh my God. Where's that one fucking dumbass chatter now? You don't arrive at this level of instability without like serious economic volatility. You don't just arrive at like this much insanity without factoring in socioeconomic conditions, chatter that was like, Hasan, you're talking a big game like you know stuff about Korea. Like, I know enough. Holy shit.
There's an inequality of opportunity. They feel like the playing field is uneven in the first place, and their efforts will not pay off. Competition in Korea is so tough, so grueling, that what 20 years ago...
It's also because old motherfuckers just don't die. And then they don't get fired. I mean, at least that's how it is in Japan for the most part, which is so crazy that, like, I always go back to that one famous Japanese Yale economist who was like, I have a solution to Japan's aging, like to Japan's capitalism crisis. Let's kill every old person. That is unironically what he said. And you want to know what's really crazy about that? Japanese youth heard that and was like, that's an incredible idea. Okay? They literally were like, oh my God, finally, someone came up with a fantastic solution. That is fucking insane. Okay? That's insane. That had to be hyperbole. No. That's not hyperbole at all. I'm not even remotely exaggerating. There is a famous Japanese economist, I think, or he was a sociologist. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but here it is with the fucking cool ass glasses. A Yale professor suggested mass suicide for old people in Japan. What did he mean? Yusuke Narita says he is mainly addressing a growing effort to revamp Japan's age-based hierarchies. Still, he has pushed the country's hottest button. Yeah, but no, you don't understand. The craziest part isn't that he suggested this, okay? Like, or he had the audacity to dream, okay? The craziest part is people heard it and were like, that's a banger idea. Like, he wasn't joking, he wasn't memeing, he was just straight up like, you know, let's just kill some of these old motherfuckers. Like, and the Japanese youth heard that and said, we hear you. That sounds like a great idea. They proposed another recently. Oh, I saw this one. Ban on women marrying after 25. This bizarre proposal to boost the birth rate in Japan. Japan's noted writer and conservative party leader Naoki Hyakuta has apologized after his comments on women in the falling birth rate in the country sparked criticism. He said that to boost the nation's birth rate, women should be banned from marriage after the age of 25 and from removing their uterus post the age of 30. I swear to God, dude. Listen. Mark Fisher cooked when he said, we can imagine the end of the world before we imagine the end of capitalism. It is easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. Okay? These people are just like staring down the barrel of a gun and going, fuck it, dude. I got no other options. Let's just kill old people. Or they're looking at the situation and going, let's just, you know, forcibly impregnate every woman under the age of 35 or under the age of 30. That's fucking insane. Yeah, he did. He just straight up said it. Yeah, he did. He said women have their uterus removed after the age of 30, not allowed to go to school after 18, unable to marry after 25. Fuck it, just kill them after 40 if they haven't given birth. Like, what are we doing? Okay, we've moved so far beyond the problems facing these different societies.
Hyper competitive, and one who is lower on the hierarchy, which in Confucianism should be, most people, have to overcome both that competition and the enormous advantages of the privileged people in Korean society to get anywhere or be anyone. If you watch the JRPG video, you might recall that Japan's economy is controlled in large part by mega conglomerates with enormous political power called the Keiretsu. In South Korea, the situation is even more severe. The chaebols are very much like the Keiretsu. They are thick webs of interwoven business relationships, but even more exclusive, as
Yeah, this is why I say South Korea is like fucking, well, it's one company that owns everything, but it's like 6 families that the chaebols own basically every aspect of the economy, and it is so fucking cooked. Oh my god. Yeah, they're fucking they're living in a techno-feudalist dystopia already.
As many of them are families built quite literally in the Confucian style. The top 10 chaebols in South Korea account for nearly 60% of the country's GDP. Another nearly 25% is accounted for by the remaining 50-some-odd chaebols. Altogether, 80 to 85% of South Korea's GDP is controlled by about 64 families. To give you an idea how preposterous these numbers are, when the United States broke up Standard Oil, you know, Rockefeller the octopus, well, Standard Oil accounted for only 1.7% of the US GDP at the time of its breakup. In 2022, Samsung's revenue by itself was a little over 20% of South Korea's GDP. The margin of error in the estimate is larger than Standard Oil's entire percentage, and in spite of the vast wealth here, the money is not trickling down. For most young people, there is simply not enough opportunity to go around, and the best that one can look forward to is to work at a chaebol, perhaps, and be treated like a wage slave. The system is untenable and unsustainable. You have to have the best grades, the most handsome or beautiful appearance, the most socially correct demeanor in order to compete for an ever...
Oh yeah, I forgot about this. Okay, so remember what I talked about the aesthetic that is in Korean society earlier? Chat can correct me on this if I'm wrong. Wait, did the mic fuck up? Hello. It went out. Is it still out? You can hear me, right? Oh my god, it went out for 1 second. You guys are making it seem like it was done. It was over. It's just fucking done. You will never hear me ever again. Remember earlier we were talking about like plastic surgery and people's like how high like people's, you know, body standards are, and how high an emphasis they put on beauty standards and whatnot, and how fucking crazy it is. Someone could correct me on this if I'm wrong. We need a historical context. Dude, I will melt you. Okay, I will send you into orbit if you ask me about Confucianism one more fucking time. Okay, we are not going to do 45 extra minutes on Neo-Confucianism in South Korea. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I think in South Korea, you put your fucking photo on your CV, right? Like they make you put your photo on your resume, right? I was shocked when I found out that, like, I think in Japan as well. That's so weird.
Shrinking slice of the pie. The common people are desperate. As we've seen, prior governments have promised crackdowns on the chaebols, have promised economic reform which never materialized in a meaningful way due to how deeply the chaebols have sunk their roots into the South Korean political apparatus. Attempting to so much as touch those roots has had massive economic consequences, and meaningfully disarming the chaebols.
Low-key, that shit would have helped me, honestly, because people see the name and they probably are like, you know, very racist towards it, but if they saw that I was like at least white looking, they probably would have been like, all right, he's probably one of the good ones. He's not one of the Mohammedan. Has an important context. Neo-Confucian Ethics and Metaphysics by Brian Van Norden. Yeah, let's watch this for an hour.
Chaebols at this point could hoist all of South Korean society along with them. Worse yet, consider Korea's problem with age. Remember what I said in part 1 about how hierarchy is powerfully determined by your age? How you'll be asked how old you are to determine where you belong in the pecking order? Have you ever worked in a company where 3 managers are in charge of micromanaging 1 employee? Well, young Koreans don't just have to put up with that dynamic at work, they have to endure it in every facet of their lives. Korea has fewer and fewer young people and an enormous elderly population that places massive expectations, often in conflicting ways, on young men and young women. Expectations that are impossible to meet given the current economic realities of South Korea and the governmental capture of the chaebols, endlessly siphoning the nation's wealth away from the populace and into exclusive, powerful chaebol families or corrupt politicians. And these young people must now also balance the cost of an aging society against their own limited avenues for opportunity or self-realization. Korean young people then have been thrust into an impossible situation. Their incredibly Confucianist society has been captured by the chaebols, an immortal emperor with roots that dig down very deep into each level of the hierarchy. Young people are fiercely competing with each other over ever-decreasing opportunity. They are becoming increasingly desperate, and the problems they face are incredibly difficult to even understand, never mind change, obfuscated as they are in that Confucian.
Turns out it's not even crazy that Ming Ming was working at a fucking coffee shop, dude. Like, at first I was like, come on, what kind of idol would work at a coffee shop? Turns out, vindicated, you know? 5 Hearts Under One Roof, vindicated once again. It's just a documentary about real Korean existence.
They are miserable. and the misery in their lives seems completely outside of their control. With this general primer on the experiences of young people in South Korea, let us also now break down what life is like for each gender in this gender war, armed as we are now with the context necessary to understand just how serious and deeply rooted these problems truly are. It's hard to be a man in Korea, but doubly so to be a young man. Society places enormous expectations upon you, and if you fail to live up to them, you are treated not as a human being with dreams and aspirations and hopes, but as a disgrace, a black sheep, a monster. The generations immediately before you managed to live up to expectations because expectations were both much lower then, and many of them experienced Korea's economic miracle. They experienced unparalleled growth, and so their...
Yeah, brother, I wonder how that happened. And I wonder why America was able to overcome this exact same population Christmas tree turned into a fucking upside down pyramid. Perhaps the one group of people in the millions that we're fucking routinely shitting on have something to do with that. I don't know.
Expectations are both higher, and they were able themselves to carry the expectations of Korea's ultra-Confucianist demands upon their backs. But you are stuck in an era of stagnation. You are one cog in an enormous machine competing against countless other cogs for a pittance of coin, and ambitiously, a shred of respect, of self-worth, of belonging. But instead of respect, you are awarded with disrespect for your efforts, disrespect from your elders, disrespect from your peers, disrespect even from your subordinates. Every year, hundreds of thousands of Korean young men like yourself are conscripted against their will into the military. If you choose not to serve, you might face jail time. Future employers might refuse to hire you if they see you didn't do your time in the military. These 2 years are treated less like actual time in the military and more like a hazing ritual, cruel and grueling for absolutely no good reason. Once you get out of the military, you then have to return to civilian life and find jobs that can support a whole family on your own. You have to run the gauntlet and wear the suits and suffer the indignity of slave-like labor. And that's the best case scenario for you if you aren't born into a position of privilege. If you aren't born into such a position of privilege, where you can't leverage your family's resources or prestige or network, then you must carry all of these expectations as well as a 10-ton weight of societal
Wow, it's a good thing we don't do this. I mean, we do this in many respects, but you have to understand, like, it's much more dire. I think the income inequality, economic inequality, income inequality is much more dire. And also on top of that, they have, mandatory conscription. It's just like in America, the neoliberal beacon of prosperity, there's always the fallacy of choice here. Okay. It's hellish. It's a nightmare scenario. And we have a lot of people that we, put in our crosshairs. We have other enemies, other societal villains that we can always point to look down upon and push aside. We do it on the virtue of white supremacy in many instances. And I think that there is like a finite amount of bigotry that everyone has. It's like the Trump battery phenomena, right? We only have only so much bigotry that we can focus on at any given moment. So our bigotry spectrum in a nation full of immigrants and in a nation where people talk about trans issues, gay issues, yada, 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 is maybe a little bit more focused on all these other subgroups instead of just women. It seems like in South Korea, they've well defined their anger and frustration directly towards just women in general. Whereas we're too racist to be as misogynistic, if that makes sense. We're too xenophobic. We're too racist. We're too Islamophobic. We're too homophobic to also hyper focus on women. We still do a healthy number. We still do a healthy bit of women hate around these parts. Okay, don't make a mistake. Don't get it confused. Some more than others, but I would say that our bigotry is spread too thin, like a real jack of all trades, master of none type situation. Whereas I think the Korean men have specced into radical misogyny, and they have become expert, tier one operators of being misogynistic. So much so that they're now talking about misinjury. South Korea needs a Hasan to channel the hate of the incels and protect the women. Yeah. Saying that after America elected a rapist felon over a woman is crazy. Okay. See, that's a great fucking take. We elected a rapist felon over a woman, but why? He said he was going to mass deport 20 million immigrants. Okay. 20 million immigrants, You think if South Korea did an Israel type thing where they start conscripting women too, would that alleviate the gender war? Because for all of its crimes, the apartheid state doesn't have a gender war issue. Maybe. Probably not though. Because I think the incels that also simultaneously want women to be conscripted, because I've heard that before, will probably be like, bitches can't fight, dude. These broads, they can't fucking fight. Israel does have a rape war issue. Yeah, that's also true. There's like, Israel has its own version of gender war shit.
Shame at having not. All of these expectations are levied on men, and none are levied on women. Women seem to have it so easy. They just have to.
Also, I don't think you want to train the entire female population in hand-to-hand combat, and because I feel like they're gonna start beating ass. You know what I mean? Maybe it's not, dude. Seeing the way that shit has, seeing the way this shit has unfolded in South Korea, I don't know if you want all of the women to be able to do hand-to-hand combat. Maybe it's the best idea. I don't know. Maybe it is. Equalize the field. Women about to do an Atomwaffen, but for, radical misandry.
Look good and stay quiet and cook the meals. That's all that society expects of them. And they can't even do just that. While we men are expected to do everything else. To provide for the family, to build a generational wealth, to pay for the dates, to pay for the places the women live and the clothes they wear and the food they eat, to serve in the military against our will. All while being disrespected by everyone around us. By the elderly, who don't understand why we aren't doing as well as they did, by foreigners, who don't understand the expectations our society places on us, and by our own women, who seem to expect more from us than what we can provide, and accuse us of crimes that we aren't committing. Something must be wrong. The system is failing us because the pieces aren't in the right place. What could it be?
I don't know, man. I feel like if it's not a crime, a lot of the stuff that we've seen from the fucking radical incels out there claiming that women are doing radical misandry, I think that should be a crime. Even if it wasn't, maybe they should be crimes. From where I'm standing, it seems like it is a crime. Like, it needs to be dealt with somehow.
The people are subordinate to the government. The sons are subordinate to their.
I know he's talking about the incel perspective.
Fathers. The younger are.
Also, there is validity to what they're saying, for the record. I like, all jokes aside, this is something that I was talking about as well, where like this is precisely what I was mentioning when I said like, this kind of attitude doesn't just come out of nowhere. Okay, people don't just like learn. It's not because South Koreans watch like a shit ton of Andrew Tate videos. Okay, if anything, some of these dudes could teach a thing or two to Andrew Tate about how to properly be a misogynist. But there is validity to a lot of the anger and resentment that South Korean men feel. It's just being misdirected, as always, against someone else that they have. That they're considering is like beneath them. It's a case of punching down. People get mad at me and say, Hasan, why do you compare everything to America? But like, I live here, and also my audience is majority American. So it's no different in thinking that like your Haitian immigrant neighbors are eating your cats and dogs and stealing your social safety nets and stealing your rent in fucking Springfield, Ohio, when your town is in a state of disrepair because there's no adequate job prospects for you, and there's no adequate housing for you. And of course, in that process, you're just like looking for someone to blame for why you feel the way that you feel. You're looking for someone, you're looking for solutions. And I'm sure that there are plenty of people in South Korea, just like in North America, there are plenty of people who will point the finger of blame at those who are even more underserved than you.
Subordinate to their elders. But the women, they want more, they expect more, and they offer disrespect instead of appreciation for the suffering we must endure on their behalf. Why do the women insist on piling more onto us? We cannot take any more. Our backs are breaking. We are at the point of madness. We cannot tolerate a single straw further, not one more step. And so every step, every encroachment.
Also, this kind of division amongst gender, like having any sort of division within the working class, is only beneficial for one group. And in South Korea, they have a name, it's chaebols, right? Like those who benefit from sitting at the tippy top of society will of course sit back and be like, great, they're fighting each other instead of fucking fighting us. Awesome.
Must be met with overwhelming force, must be pushed back into its place to preserve society, to preserve our values, to preserve our sanity. It's not really about a wetsuit or anything else. It's about Twitter girls who don't even play the game having more say over its art and character development than we do, when we are the ones playing the games and contributing the funds, and not them. It's about being made subordinate to the whims of women, even in our male safe spaces. It's not really about Megalia or a little pinch causing us some offense over genitalia. It's what the pinch represents. Disrespect at a point where we are already disrespected to the maximum amount by everyone around us. It's about a nonsensical rebellion against the system by women who have the easiest role in the hierarchy, eroding the very strengths that empower Korean society and make its cultural exports the envy of the world. We are hurting and we're not being heard. Why can't women just understand that they have it easy and at the very least stay quiet if they can't be respectful? It does suck to be a man in Korea. Not to give away too much about myself, but my own culture is not that dissimilar to yours, and I get it. There are a lot of responsibilities that we must bear as men. There are expectations levied on us that we can't meet because the world prohibits us from meeting them, and then we are blamed for the world. Korean society is dehumanizing. You may think to yourself, you men, well, some of the actions we take are a bit over the top, but the ends justify the means. We can't take anymore. It's human nature to judge oneself by one's intentions, and others by their actions. When we see a woman protesting the art of a game they don't even play, or sneaking offensive hand gestures into art, we see their extremist actions. When we invade the offices of a developer, when we go after an artist on Twitter, we judge ourselves by our intentions. Sure, the artist is the wrong artist, but she's still a feminist, and our intentions matter, not our actions. I want you just for a moment to join me and look at the intentions of the young women in your society. Because just as Korean society places an enormous burden of
everything that the men are complaining about, women also literally get punished by, and then some on top of that because of the radically misogynist ways in which South Korean society operates. The only major difference is that they don't have to serve in the military. That's it. But there's plenty of unrestricted oppression that they have to deal with. I assume that there's a lot of like caretaking as well within Korean culture that they like. There's a lot of physical standards that like both men and women have to subscribe to, from what I understand. But I'm sure that it's probably worse for women regardless. Like the societal standards placed upon women and the importance of like how women have to look is universally under patriarchy going to be much more rigorous. And also on top of that, you have to, take care of the children, take care of your parents. That's another thing that, from what I understand, is a big problem. Kamala Harris talked about this. She called it the sandwich generation. But it is true, especially in Korea, where I think you have to make sure that you're taking care of your fucking in-laws and shit. Yeah.
Expectations upon you, the men. Your women also suffer from expectations, ones that you might not even be aware of.
This video, by the way, context and all, turned into an absolute fucking banger. Okay, this video is incredible. Like it's so well thought out. It's so well researched. I mean, 10 out of 10, no fucking notes. Maybe we learned maybe we learned a little too much about Neo-Confucianism, but maybe there's a little bit too much context. But Moon, why did the chicken cross the road? Audience, don't know why. Well, first we need to establish what a chicken is. Let's go back to roughly 6000 BC with the domestication of the red jungle fowl. What is this? Have you ever seen anything about the new Bonhoeffer movie and the ADL ad they put in at the end? My parents roped me into going to it tonight. I've never seen a more hypocritical stunt in film. No, what? I have not. I have no idea what that is.
You say Korean girls have it easy because they don't have to make money, as that's the man's job. Well, they'd like to. But that itself is also a societal expectation that many of these women are trying to break free of.
He's goated.
In South Korea, labor force participation by women is nearly the lowest among OECD countries. But the gender pay gap in South Korea is not amongst the worst. It is the actual worst amongst all OECD countries. Duke University's Journal of Korean Studies reports that in Korea, in 2020, the median earnings of women working full-time was 32% lower than men's, which is a much larger gap than the OECD average of 12.5%. Women in Korea hold only 10% of managerial positions in the private sector, when the average for OECD countries is 30%. And perhaps most seriously of all, a disproportionately high number of women work in precarious jobs that pay low wages and provide few employee benefits, little job security, and limited labor rights, which you've seen firsthand as a result of your protests. When the women
except for Gran, my goat, my queen,
protest your treatment of Velmori or Teso, they aren't protesting a swimsuit or a hand signal either. They want the opportunity to work and receive equal pay and work in jobs that aren't so-called precarious jobs with low wages and limited labor rights. They want to be artists and developers without fear. They want to be able to engage in the same free speech that you do without being fired or forcibly resigned or harassed. Actions and intentions. And ultimately, the end result is if the women are allowed to work and have labor protections and have a better, fairer wage, your burden, your expectations become lighter because you no longer have to be the sole breadwinner. You don't have to be the one that always gets a high-paying job to cover the cost of 2 people, because now the women can also get a job, and you can have 2 medium-paying jobs, reducing the burden on everyone. But I know it's not that simple. That's not really a solution at all, is it? What good is having 2 jobs if everyone still suffers? There are greater, far more insidious, systematic problems, socio-economic problems, that are at the core of what South Korea is, built into the country from the moment of its inception. It won't be easy to solve these issues. There is no simple fix, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to your face. But if there is a way to solve these issues, if there is some way to overcome these problems, you will have both of you have the same intentions, to lower the burdens of expectation that society places on you and to reassert some control.
Yeah, he's going to be like, you have to kill the old. South Korean men and women under a certain age have to get together and finally do the deed. Just like the suggestion in Japan. Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like people are way more focused on the gender war dynamic than anything else. Like, I don't think they're gonna do a elderly pogrom, let alone the real revolutionary act that must occur. Is this why Gran dresses like she does? The lanyard is the only link that shows she's gainfully employed, so she has to display it to demonstrate her worth in a hyper-capitalistic society. Is this why she holds the lanyard so close to her heart? Yeah. She's like, I'm a manager and I need you to know that. And she's actually in that, it's a revolutionary act where she's actually taking advantage of the misogynistic tendencies of men to make them hyper-focus on her bodacious boobs, but only in an effort to reinforce her class position.
Over your lives. To have the liberty to be people with meaningful relationships and economic security and families, instead of being cogs in a machine that produces for others that which you cannot have for yourselves. In a survey conducted by Pew Research in 2016, it was found that about 7% of American women have received cosmetic surgery. The percentage of American women who have had cosmetic surgery between the ages of 18 and 29 was only 3%. In a similar survey conducted by Gallup Korea in 2015, it was found that 1 in 3 Korean women between the ages of 19 and 29 have had cosmetic surgery. Why is this the case? Korean women are very naturally beautiful. You Korean men, more than anyone, know this to be true. You, the men, didn't ask this of the women, just as they didn't ask you to take the responsibility of being the sole breadwinners. You don't even want them to get cosmetic surgery or have to wear makeup. You think they're lovely just as they are. And they'd love to just be themselves and thereby be able to also lower their standards and reduce the—
Bro, that shit is crazy, dude. Those percentages are wild. It's a common practice to give double eyelid surgery to women when they turn 18 is crazy. To be fair, it's a lot cheaper in Korea than in America. Dude, it's not just chatter. You think the only fucking hurdle to clear is finances? Like, what are you, crazy? There's obviously it's a lot more normalized, dude. What the fuck?
The pressure of being perfectly beautiful for everyone. There is so much that the so-called male chauvinists and so-called radical feminists agree on. For example, there's been a big deal made in Korea about illegal cameras being placed in bathrooms. Women are angry that it happened and they want to hold the men accountable, and the men are angry that all of them are being painted as perverts, that some of them have received retaliatory bathroom recordings and are thus being subjected to the scorn of angry women for the actions of a few deviants. Every reasonable person agrees that this behavior is wrong. It's wrong for women to do to men, it's wrong for men to do to women, and in a reasonable society, the solution should be to work towards the elimination of all illegal bathroom cameras instead of making it about gender conflict. Likewise for our Gacha drama. Even the Chinese and Japanese Gacha communities scratch their heads at the behavior of Koreans when they get angry at swimsuit skins or little pinches appearing in art. And they, like you perhaps, ask themselves, why is this behavior so irrational? As we've seen, South Korea is a society that is both deeply hierarchical and socially dysfunctional. One is taught that they have power over those below them.
Oh, we're back, bro. We're back. Give me the fucking Confucianism right now, dude. Context time.
The hierarchy, and that if society has disharmony, they should look beneath them in the hierarchy and try to correct the problem. The captain chastises the first officer who chastises the GI on the ground. The chaebols squeeze the government squeezes the middle class working dad beats his son, and the son beats his girlfriend. The angry girlfriend may even go one layer lower and lash out against the LGBT community. Each layer protests the—
Oh my god, is that why the 4B movement is like, they're fucking transphobic? So who does the gay Korean shit on? You know, who does a trans Korean person shit on? Like, there's nobody left at that point, you know? Go home. And Filipinos, for some reason, immigrants, do they even have immigrants, dude? What percentage of Korea has—
the poor treatment they receive from the layer above them. Each one seeks reform. The women seek equal rights from the men. The men seek better treatment from society. Society demands a less corrupt government, and the government wishes to reform the chaebols. But each layer has determined that it is powerless to affect the trajectory of the layer above it, having experienced such firsthand. And so they do what they know how to do, what Neo-Confucianism has taught them, what has been drilled into their psyches. They punch down. This is the crux of the Korean gender war. This is the sad truth around which the entire edifice of this conflict is built. The chaebols rule Korea, and Korean livelihood depends on the continued existence and empowerment of the chaebols. They can control whomsoever they want, even government reformers, through bribes, corruption, or other manipulation. The experience for regular Korean people, and especially young people, is increasingly bitter. The young people, having lost hope in meaningful reform, desperately wish to escape Hell Joseon. Those who cannot physically escape will seek out other ways to mentally escape. They'll get super into movies or anime or books. They'll dedicate their lives to a new religious movement, or they'll obsess over their favorite pop stars, bread, and circuses. Or maybe, just maybe, if they're young men, they'll escape by playing gacha games. Games where the women are beautiful and fawn over them, where they can be powerful heroes and make a meaningful difference in a cruel, unfathomably hostile world. They can receive a glimpse, a taste of what society promises them, what they never seem to receive. I'd even argue that this is partially why Korean games are so grindy. In a society where it seems impossible to find self-worth, where young men are spent like fuel for the chaebol furnace, it feels nice to grind for something that takes effort and yields a reward, even if that reward is small and the effort is substantial. When that little bubble of escapism, that little mental haven is disrupted, even if that disruption isn't real, even if that disruption is just the outside world projecting a shadow onto the proverbial cave wall, the response is very severe. It's not necessarily about women.
This puts a sinister undertone on the 5 hearts under one roof. Excuse me. This is why 5 hearts under one roof is the solution, okay?
Rights or skins or pinches, but about reasserting control over the very limited things these men actually feel they have control over. And the more control Korean society cedes to these angry men in this gacha gender war, the more control they crave. These young men, having lived their lives with so little control, so little agency, so little power, have both now a vent for their frustrations and an apparent enemy to blame for their suffering. This all seems like a bit of a stretch, Mooney, I can hear you say. Aren't you reaching a bit? Isn't it reductive to take all of the gender war issues going on and reduce the fault to just the insecurities of men and the hopeless state of South Korean society? That's not what I'm saying. The insecurity of men does play a major role, yes, but that insecurity has been very purposefully manipulated, very cynically directed. A house divided against itself cannot stand. A people divided against themselves cannot revolt. Let us finish our discussion of history then, and complete our understanding of the Korean gender war by giving you a glimpse into modern Korean politics. The president that came after Roh Moo-hyun, you will recall, was the former CEO of Hyundai Engineering and Construction, which nowadays has been absorbed by Hyundai Motor Group, the core of the many spin-off companies that together compose the complex web which constitutes the Hyundai chaebol. Lee Myung-bak was no political newcomer. He had served as the mayor of Seoul in 2002, and given Roh Moo-hyun's unpopularity at the time and the ongoing investigations into alleged corruption, Lee Myung-bak was able to take the presidency in a landslide. His platform was simple. He promised to reform and reinvigorate the economy, to strengthen relations with the United States, and to deal with North Korea. Almost immediately after taking power, though, Lee proceeded to negotiate a controversial free trade agreement with the United States and pushed for privatization of public companies. Like his predecessors, he conceded ground to the chaebols and to the United States and built his power off of economic legitimacy. But Lee was no reformer at heart. He was of the chaebols and by the chaebols and for the chaebols. He was their man in the chair. Now look, I know I've simplified Korean politics to an extraordinary extent. These leaders are more than just walking corruption scandals. There's a ton of political nuance that I'm not touching upon because they're outside of the scope of this video. But as you will see, corruption runs very deep in the South Korean government and continues to do so to this very day. Lee's presidency came and went, and though allegations of corruption emerged, they never went anywhere. It wasn't until 2018, in the wake of another corruption scandal, which we'll soon get to, that Lee Myung-bak was investigated and eventually arrested and sentenced to 15 years imprisonment on charges of corruption. Reuters reported at the time that the Seoul Central District Court found Lee guilty of embezzlement of about 24.6 billion Korean won, about $21.77 million, from a private auto parts maker headed by his brother. And he also accepted bribes from Korea's largest chaebol, Samsung, and from other capital interests as well. But Lee's corruption pales in comparison to that of his successor, the first female president of South Korea and the first female head of state in East Asia, Park Geun-hye.
Damn, dog. They put a woman in charge, and look at what she did. Let her do some girl bossing. Let her do some girl bossing, okay? Y'all don't want to see a woman thrive, okay? She said, if men can do it, I can do it too.
South Korea has woken up to its first female president-elect. And some people here on the streets of Seoul think that she may be able to do a lot to try and help the lives of women.
Now, Park was already a well-known politician in South Korea prior to her becoming president by Lee Myung-bak, the former president, in their party's last primaries. And so her name was already very well established amongst the voting public, and particularly in the conservative GNP party. If you don't recognize the name Park Geun-hye,
oh, color me surprised. It was a conservative woman. This is why I said before, chat, if America ever has a fucking female leadership, it's most likely going to be a conservative, okay? And I don't mean like a Hillary Clinton style conservative in the Democratic Party. It's gonna be like a fucking right-wing reactionary from the Republican Party.
Okay, if you don't know what happens next, then prepare yourself. The truth is sometimes kookier than any fiction can be. Park Geun-hye is the eldest daughter of Park Chung-hee, the dictator, the one who most masterfully wielded the chaeballs. And Park Chung-hee was once friends with one Choi Tae-min, the leader of a new religious movement called Yongsaegyo, the Church of the Spirit World, and an alleged Maitreya, or future Buddha. Choi Tae-min, in part through his friendship with Park Chung-hee, amassed an enormous amount of wealth and power in South Korea. Park Geun-hye's mother, the then wife of Park Chung-hee, Yuk Yong-soo, was assassinated on August 15, 1974, after a failed attempt at assassinating Park Chung-hee went awry. As Park Geun-hye grieved the loss of her mother, she was allegedly approached by Choi Tae-min, who claimed that he had seen her mother in a dream, an event which marked the start of a long, friendly relationship between Park and Choi. Choi Tae-min had many children, one of whom was Choi Soon-sil, a prominent and...
Yeah, she was in a cult while being president. Absolute insanity. No, it's not. It's the CIA. It quite literally is a cult that the CIA propped up. It exists in America too, and in Japan. Why do you think they fucking killed Shinzo Abe? Someone in the chat said, do you mean the CIA or the KCIA? Bitch, what do you think the KCIA is? Wait, isn't this the same cult? I thought the Moonies were an offshoot of this cult. No, this is the Church of Eternal Life. Wait, I might be wrong. Cult racism, I apologize.
And powerful businesswoman who served as Park Geun-hye's right-hand woman. And Choi Soon-sil had a daughter named Chung Yu-ra, who loved horses. She was a gold medalist at the 2014 Asian Games in dressage. In 2015, Chung was admitted to Ewha Women's University, a highly prestigious school. The Korea Herald reported that the chief of admissions at the university ordered interviewers to, and I quote, select a person who brought an Asian Games gold medal. None of the other candidates were permitted to bring a medal, but Chung brought hers in violation of school policy and was selected. An audit later allegedly discovered that the interviewers purposefully gave other students lower scores to help Chung with her acceptance. It wasn't enough just to graft Chung into the school, they torpedoed the futures of regular young Koreans who had otherwise done everything right. During her time at university, Chung was marked as present for only 8 classes over 3 regular semesters. She never did her homework, she didn't take any exams or turn in assignments, and yet she reportedly received stellar grades. In one instance, one of Chung's professors was found to have done an important project for her, cementing his or her work as Chung's own. Students at this highly prestigious, extremely exclusive school, being amongst Korea's best and brightest, quickly noticed the preferential treatment that Chung was receiving, and they staged protests. Pursuant then to all of this negative attention, the Korean cable TV network JTBC...
Dude, it's so funny when like everything is collapsing, but there's still clearly remnants of like institutional hierarchies that people still cling on to. And this is one of them where they're like, what the fuck? It's like, bro, everything sucks. Like, this is the one thing that you think is supposed to be real. I don't know. It's kind of like Americans thinking like sports is fair, you know, meritocracy in sports, and just like really clinging on to that as a principle. Because literally everything is unfair and everything is fundamentally busted. But Americans still have this like firm and committed belief that like, no, actually, you can overcome your material realities in the field of sports.
Opened investigations into both Chun and her mother, Choi Soon-sil. By sheer luck, JTBC obtained a discarded tablet once owned by Choi Soon-sil, and on this tablet, JTBC discovered drafts of 44 different speeches and other statements that President Park had made. Choi received many of these speeches days or even hours prior to their delivery, and certain passages in those speeches were marked in red. This powerful businesswoman, this daughter of a cult leader, had access to extremely privileged information and was editing the speeches and directing the policy of the president.
Also, chaebols, like, they get away with doing horrific shit, like both structurally but also directly, like physical violence, which is always shocking. Like, what was it? There was that famous story of the one of the chaebols that like demanded the plane fucking land or some shit. I'm misremembering, but it's like, it's basically like you're God's chosen son. Yeah, I think it was Peanuts. Yeah, no, they are celestial dragons in One Piece, basically. The Nut Rage incident, referred to as Nutgate, Kangkong Hohang, was an air rage incident that occurred on December 5th in John F. Kennedy International Airport. On Korean Air Flight 086, Korean Air Vice President Heather Cho, Korean name Cho Hun Hyuna, later changed to Cho Sung Yong, Dissatisfied with the way the flight attendants served nuts on the plane, ordered the aircraft to return to gate before takeoff. Nutgate. All first-class passengers, including Cho, were given nuts bagged in their original packaging in keeping with the airline's procedures. However, Cho had expected them to be served on a plate in first class. She questioned the cabin crew chief about the standards procedure of serving the nuts. After a heated confrontation, Cho assaulted him. That's the part that is really funny. Like they throw hands, dude. When they get mad and they don't get their way, like they just fucking throw hands. And ordered him off the plane, requiring a return to the gate and delaying the flight for about 20 minutes. When the incident became public, Cho and Korean Air were heavily criticized. In the aftermath, Cho resigned from one of her several executive positions at Korean Air. She was subsequently found guilty in a South Korean court of obstructing aviation safety and given a 12-month prison sentence, of which she served 5 months. That's crazy. Austin showed if he had power. Also, she had several executive positions, and it took 2 fucking years for the crew to get their job back.
Discovery struck South Korea like a lightning bolt, and mass protests erupted, followed by investigations of both the president and her staff. At the end of those investigations, a wide web of corruption was uncovered, a web so vast that we don't even have time to cover each instance of corruption in this video. Instead, we'll fast forward to the end. Park was successfully impeached, and both Choi and Park were brought before the Seoul Central District Court. Many of Park's associates, ranging from her personal aides to high-profile government officials to business tycoons, were jailed for corruption. Most notably, Shin Dong-bin, the chairman of the 5th largest chaebol in Korea, Lotte, was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for offering a bribe of $6.5 million to Choi and Park. And Lee Jae-young, the then vice chairman, now executive chairman of the largest chaebol Samsung, was convicted of bribery, embezzlement, perjury, and other charges. Lee Jae-young had made payments of over $36 million to foundations owned by Choi, had given a prize horse and several $1 million to Choi's daughter as well. He did this in order to secure government support for a major restructuring of Samsung, which just so happened to allow Lee to become the head of Samsung later down the road. Park herself was convicted of abusing her power to extort money from companies.
It's kind of wild that they still go to prison, though. Like, we don't do that shit in America. Are we even more cooked? Like, at least when there's enough public pressure, like, the Korean government's like, all right, you got to go to jail. Sorry. Like, who the fuck goes to jail in America, dude? Donald Trump wanted to make a pedophile the attorney general. What the fuck are we talking about?
Companies, of unlawfully pressuring Hyundai to sign a deal with a company owned by Choi and forcing them to run ads for her company, of soliciting that bribe for $6.5 million by Lotte, of forcing a telecom company to hire a close friend of Choi's, of leaking 47 confidential presidential documents to Choi, of various bribes surrounding Samsung, of receiving bribes from the National Intelligence Service, the NSA, and more. Choi was sentenced to 20 years in prison and a fine equivalent to $16.6 million US. Park was sentenced to 24 years in prison and a $16.6 million fine as well. Seems like a stunning victory for the Korean people, right? The corrupt president has been removed, the influence of the chaebols has been gouged out of the government, and now things will be better, won't they? The people are back at the top of the hierarchy now, aren't they? Well, no. I'm afraid not. The next president was Moon Jae-in. He came from the opposing political party and was not a conservative but a progressive. He ran on a platform of reforming the chaebols. He raised the minimum wage by more than 16%. He lowered the so-called maximum work week from 68 hours to 52 hours, which I will note for the record doesn't actually mean one only works for 52 hours a week. He was also in power when COVID-19 struck Korea, and his leadership is credited with substantially reducing the impact of the virus on Korea. But despite his attempts at economic reform, the chaebols were far too powerful. Although Moon himself managed to avoid allegations of corruption, members of his government, including his direct appointees, were not so fortunate. Consider Cho Kook, Moon's appointed Minister of Justice, who allegedly conducted illicit business activities and was sentenced to 2 years in prison for falsifying documents showing his son had completed a prestigious internship that he never actually did, and for forging his daughter.
Dude, why are they always doing like low-level grift? Why is it always like related? What the I mean, I know that like in Korean society, like your school, your education is like really important for your future prospects, and then you have to like get into one of these big corporations. But it's kind of funny that it's like everyone's getting popped because they're interfering with school. God damn, just fucking hire a better tutor. Like, what the fuck? The 11th richest person in the world might go to jail in America. Meet Gautam Adani, the Indian billionaire and business tycoon who was just charged with a massive bribery case in the US. Remember when I said, we don't do this to our guys? Your solution, your counter to that was, here, look at an Indian billionaire that we're going to prosecute and not actually throw in prison. Yeah, I'm sure Korea would be really fucking ruthless towards some Japanese rich person as well if they had the opportunity. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? Dude, Nutgate is so
academic
funny.
Credentials. You tell me. How is the average Korean supposed to compete with behavior like this? Moon Jae-in became president on May 10, 2017 and served until May 9, 2022. On February 13, 2018, Shin Dong-bin, the head of Lotte, was sentenced to 30 months in prison pursuant to the bribe issued to Choi Soon-sil in exchange for licenses which would allow Lotte to operate duty-free stores. On October 5, 2018, a South Korean appeals court agreed to suspend his sentence to time already served, thus setting him free. He remains the CEO of Lotte to this very day.
Yeah. That's the other funny part. They go to jail, but then they like still retain their position. That's so funny. Yeah, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, big dog. You still got your job. That's so stupid, dude.
Yeon, head of Samsung, was convicted on August 25, 2017 and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was let out on parole by the Seoul High Court, pursuant to a suspended sentence after just 11 months. The Supreme Court reviewed the case and remanded it to the High Court in 2019, and Lee was sent back to jail briefly following a retrial. Yet he would be released again on parole shortly thereafter. On August 12, 2022, Lee Jae-yeon was pardoned by current Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol. Lee maintained control of Samsung throughout his brief time in and out of prison. PBS reports that business leaders and politicians had called for Lee's pardon. Justice Minister Han Dong-hoon stated at the time that the pardons were, and I quote, aimed at overcoming the economic crisis through encouraging business activity. It was just like what happened to the industrialists under Park Chung-hee, imprisoned, fined, and released in exchange for their cooperation. Wield the scepter, gain legitimacy, empower the chaebols, feed the beast. On December 23, 2021, President Moon Jae-in granted a special pardon to former President Park Geun-hye. This is what he said concerning the pardon. We should move into a new era by getting over the pains of the past. It's time to boldly pull together all our strengths for the future rather than fighting against each other while being preoccupied with the past. And believe it or not, even former President Lee Myung-bak received a pardon. Remember him? The president who was the former CEO of Hyundai and who took bribes from Samsung, amongst other...
Yeah, she said Obama. He said, Obama! We must not look backwards. We must look forward.
Crimes of corruption. He too was pardoned 1 year later on December 27, 2022, by current President Yoon Suk-yeol.
And pussy too?
After all the smoke and mirrors, after all the pomp and circumstance, nothing changes.
Let me be queer.
The hierarchy reasserts itself into the proper order. And the
gay Obama grow. Be like.
And this brings us to the very end of our history lesson with the aforementioned current President Yoon Suk-yeol, a very staunch conservative who has promised exactly the same thing that each of his predecessors has. He promised to fight inequality and unemployment and fight corruption. But he has also promised economic deregulation and a hardline stance against feminism. We won't get into the...
I'm not gonna lie, chat. I had a great time today, by the way. Like looking at these long YouTube videos. I had a fantastic time. I don't care if some of you are like, man, why didn't you cover the news or whatever? But like, this shit is peak. You know, I used to do this all the time. It was fun. It was informative. It was instructive. Stop asking me to play mouthwashing. Fuck. Non-stop with this one. Non-stop. The audience is begging for you to play mouthwashing. I brought it up one time. Anyway, I will also do more of this tomorrow. I fucking did 9 hours, dude. It like time just blew by. Didn't even pay attention. Didn't even realize what was going on. But